Within the tender embrace of flickering candlelight, whose tremulous glow lends an eerie vitality to the surrounding shadows, a profound silence descends. The air, redolent with the unmistakable aroma of aged wax and ancient paper, breathes the quiet dignity of a venerable library, while somewhere in the distant rafters, timber protests with a slow, deliberate creak. It is within this hushed sanctuary that a daring inquiry begins to coalesce, not yet articulated, for such profound questions demand a silent incubation, a slow unfurling within the confines of contemplation before they can truly be voiced. The query itself is startling. What if the Nazarene had offspring? What if, instead of culminating in the anguish of Calvary, his progeny discreetly wove its way through the intricate tapestry of historical events, traveling under assumed identities, navigating obscure passages of influence and authority, meticulously safeguarded by individuals whose allegiance transcended any earthly dominion? This particular line of questioning often elicits a furrowed brow from academic scholars, while members of the clergy judiciously sidestep its implications. Yet for those who craft narratives, a subtle, knowing smile frequently plays upon their lips. The investigation positions itself on two distinct philosophical terrains, one foot firmly planted on the unyielding bedrock of documented history, the other poised on the ephemeral, shrouded realm of conjecture. Historians are quick to point out that no contemporary Roman archives allude to any children of Jesus. Similarly, the Gospels, whether canonical or apocryphal, maintain a consistent silence on this matter. Nevertheless, within the margins of venerable manuscripts, nestled between the curling leaves of monastic commentaries, faint allusions persist. A cherished companion mentioned here, an enigmatic journey to the southern reaches of Gaul noted there. Even amidst the arid landscape of academic discourse, the nascent tendrils of intriguing hypothesis begin to emerge. Some historical researchers continue to debate whether the supposed family tomb, unearthed in Jerusalem in the 1980s, amounted to anything more than a mere serendipity of nomenclature. The majority of experts tend to dismiss it as such. However, a contingent of archaeologists, those with dust-covered boots and a penchant for challenging established narratives, linger a little longer over the inscriptions, tracing letters that seem to murmur in defiance of conventional doctrine. Should such a lineage indeed have existed, it would undoubtedly have necessitated unwavering protection, not from the Roman legions, which had long since faded into antiquity, but from the volatile political currents of medieval Christendom, where lineage dictated authority, and authority was inherently perilous. It is at this juncture that the crimson emblem of the Knights Templar emerges intriguingly into consideration. The Templars, those formidable warrior monks officially tasked with safeguarding pilgrims, may have simultaneously acted as guardians for a different kind of sacred traveler, a precious bloodline moving discreetly from port to port, from fortified castle to secluded keep. Much like a holy relic deemed too sacred for public display, one might envision a dimly lit chamber within a 12th century fortress, the air suffused with the pungent aroma of peat smoke from a smoldering fire. A knight kneels, head bowed, not before a reliquary, but in the presence of a woman standing in shadow, her countenance shrouded within the deep folds of a cowl. While no official ledger records such a scene, the imagined scent of that fire and the precise scrape of that kneeling gesture possess a vividness that feels too authentic to be entirely fabricated. Naturally, a degree of circumspection is warranted. Fringe theories frequently rely upon the fragile framework of hopeful conjecture. Some proponents conjure elaborate conspiracies, clandestine matrimonial unions, parchments clandestinely conveyed through tempestuous storms, or ancestral lines meticulously concealed behind layers of false heraldry. And yet, is it not profoundly curious that such narratives endure, traversing centuries, adopting new guises while retaining their fundamental essence? The situation might be likened to that of sailors who repeatedly discern the same elusive island on charts meticulously crafted by different hands. The candle's flame dwindles perceptibly. The exploration remains at its nascent stage, yet the surrounding space already feels transformed, as if the very walls have drawn closer, eager to absorb what revelations are yet to unfold. From a distant recess within the mind's corridor, a faint echo resonates, the solemn peal of a church bell. It is not a summons to devotion, but rather an invitation to profound introspection. And so, the collective attention leans forward, allowing the nascent question to become deeply embedded. For this evening, there is no demand for an immediate resolution. There is only an agreement to follow wherever the inquiry may lead. The profound question has now permeated the luminous air like a fragrant, yet increasingly pungent incense, curling into every corner and lingering in the folds of individual thoughts. This inquiry now accompanies observers as they step softly through the confined, ancient stone corridor of a cloister, where the air carries the faint, damp scent of rain on limestone. Beyond the cloister walls, the night sky offers no moon, merely a sparse scattering of stars, each one trembling in the cold expanse like a meticulously guarded secret, awaiting its revelation. Somewhere ahead, past a series of arched windows, a low murmur reaches the ears, the voice of an aged monk, fragile and tremulous, reminiscent of aged parchment left too close to a flame. He recounts a narrative, though not the kind typically found within official liturgies. It is a tale of immense antiquity, predating even the abbey's foundations, concerning a grievously wounded monarch whose lands mirror his affliction, and who patiently awaits a sacred chalice to be brought to his lips. The Fisher King, he pronounces him. The monk's tone is devoid of solemnity, imbued instead with a clandestine air, as if this tale were intended not for the sanctity of the chapel, but for the intimate setting of the refectory after the candles have burned low. In his articulation, the venerable vessel is not merely the Holy Grail, it is, he asserts, a container bearing a bloodline. Blood of the king and king of the blood, he murmurs, as if reciting a phrase honed to a resonant Polish through countless generations of oral transmission. Some historians continue to debate whether this specific iteration of the Grail story represents a post-classical fabrication or a subtle reverberation of something far more ancient, a Gnostic whisper carried westward from the Levant. Mainstream scholars, of course, tend to anchor the Fisher King resolutely to Celtic mythology, viewing him as a literary symbol ingeniously repurposed within Christian allegory. Yet, fringe researchers, often possessing an abundance of leisure and extensive access to archival resources, meticulously draw thin but compelling connections between the Grail, the family of Jesus, and the protective oversight of certain knightly orders. They observe that in particular versions of the legend, the Fisher King's domain lies within the shadow of a fortified order, whose distinctive emblem, notably, is a red cross. The monk pauses to sip from his own cup, a modest, tarnished vessel that, beneath layers of grime, might be pewter or perhaps even silver. A wry, knowing gleam twinkles in his eye, conveying a silent message. I will not confirm your suspicion, but I also will not relieve you of it. Listeners perceive his description of a journey, consistently westward, always toward regions where rivers expand and the soil grows fertile. He speaks of disguised companions, of precious freight, concealed not within the gleam of gold, but in humble linen, and of the imperative to adopt new identities at every port. The air now carries the faint scent of humid fleece and the lingering wood smoke drifting in from the cloister courtyard. A bell tolls somewhere beyond the abbey walls, its tone deep and round, the sound of time muttering its own timeless secrets. There is, of course, a poignant irony in the fact that such a narrative, supposedly too vital to be forgotten, has persisted only in the realm of myth. If the Grail truly carried not wine, but a lineage, it must have passed through hands more ruthlessly practical than spiritually devout, guided by individuals more pragmatic than pious. Despite all the reverence accorded to it in poetic verse, one might surmise its true custodians were far less romantic, perhaps even a trifle exasperated by the immense responsibility. After all, imagine the burden of safeguarding an object or a person that half the world dismisses as purely metaphorical. A silent gratitude is extended to the monk, though he never inquires about identities, and observers step back into the cloister's cool air. The stars now appear sharper, and the small flame of illumination held in the accompanying hand wavers as if with an almost sentient awareness that it is but one light amidst an infinite multitude. Somewhere, perhaps secreted within a chest beneath the flagstones, lies the cup of which he spoke, or perhaps it never touched this hallowed place at all. Regardless, the spectral murmur of the Fisher King has now intertwined with the initial profound query, and together they move ahead of the inquiry into the next corridor of history, opening a door previously unnoticed. The nocturnal air has grown cooler still, and as the exploration extends beyond the cloister, the small flame of illumination held is engulfed by the profound nocturnal gloom. In its stead, the stars commence their silent work, scattered across the firmament like delicate flecks of parchment gold leaf. The investigative trajectory now leads toward a modest chamber tucked into the side of the abbey, a space where the air carries the distinct scent of cedar chests and the ethereal, dust-laden specter of aged vellum. It is here that the first of the genealogies is unrolled. The parchment emits a delicate, crisp crackle, akin to frozen leaves beneath the examining fingers. Each line of ink has deepened with the passage of centuries, as if the very names inscribed have grown heavier with the immense weight of time. Initially, the document presents the sort of familial record any archivist might anticipate: counts, dukes, queens, and the occasional bishop, whose painted likeness bears an expression of mild distrust toward the artisan. But then, the branches of the lineage begin to diverge into unexpected and enigmatic pathways. Mainstream historians frequently assert that medieval genealogies served as much as instruments of political maneuvering as they did as factual records, half propaganda, half parchment. A royal scribe possessed the skill to meticulously weave a bloodline to suit the expedient needs of the moment, superimposing venerable ancestral figures or biblical patriarchs onto the family tree like purely ornamental fruit. Yet here, amidst these curling names, lies something truly anomalous, a branch that stubbornly resists dissolution. It gracefully leaps across national borders and spans centuries, conspicuously bypassing more celebrated rulers to meticulously trace an unbroken succession of lesser-known heirs. Some researchers dismiss such interconnections as nothing more than coincidence, the unavoidable convergence of noble blood in a continent where consanguineous marriages were commonplace and, on occasion, even prenuptial unions occurred. However, fringe theorists, ever alert to the faint, telltale wisp of concealed intrigue beneath the stone, contend that this hidden branch has been painstakingly pruned from public records and assiduously nurtured within private ones, representing a quiet, deliberate cultivation. Furthermore, the names themselves, one or two, appear to carry subtle echoes of the Near East, cumbersomely rendered into Latinate forms, as though they had journeyed a considerable distance before finding their resting place on this page. The script is remarkably fine, the ink unwavering, strongly suggesting the hand of a scribe who possessed precise knowledge of what he was immortalizing within the annals of time and simultaneously cloaking in secrecy. One's fingers traverse the aged parchment, discerning the subtle elevations where the quill's pressure left an indelible mark upon the animal skin. Beyond the confines of the chamber, the wind assails the shutters with a persistent clatter, and a loosened iron hinge emits a mournful groan with each forceful gust. Intertwined within this cacophony of sound resides a stark reminder that both written records and the intricate web of political maneuvers possess an inherent fragility. Both can be rent asunder with ease. Both can be consumed by the destructive embrace of fire, leaving behind only ash and memory. It would, of course, prove immensely tempting to postulate that this unbroken lineage, meticulously recorded, represents the very ancestral chain that has long been sought, the fabled bloodline of Jesus, clandestinely woven into the fabric of Europe's most ancient and powerful royal houses. Yet, the allure of temptation and the unyielding clarity of truth seldom align. A segment of the scholarly community continues to debate whether the appearance of such distinctly Eastern appellations within European genealogical charts was simply a consequence of Crusader marriages, the natural, intricate merging of cultures that inevitably arose when European knights spent extended periods within the sophisticated courts of the Levant. Conversely, other intellectual factions propose an alternative interpretation, that these strategic unions served as a convenient subterfuge, a veil skillfully drawn to conceal a heritage of such profound significance that it could not, under any circumstances, be openly acknowledged or discussed. Should the latter hypothesis indeed hold true, then this venerable parchment transcends the simple definition of a mere family tree. Instead, it transforms into a complex cartographic representation of a river's journey. Its genesis point remains shrouded in mystery, artfully concealed within the undulating terrain of historical epochs. Nevertheless, the currents of its narrative flow with sufficient clarity to be meticulously followed, provided one possesses the discernment to disregard the officially sanctioned markers and instead place trust in the subtle, often overlooked meanderings of the historical stream. The solitary candle within the chamber now flickers precariously, its flame diminishing, poised on the precipice of its own obliteration. In its waning luminescence, the ancient ink upon the page appears to momentarily scintillate, not through any supernatural agency, but in that peculiar human tendency for the eye to perceive an elusive shimmer, just as an object prepares to recede from view. The parchment is meticulously rolled, slowly and with utmost care, as if a hasty movement might elicit a soft, historical sigh from its delicate surface. As the observer then retreats into the expansive, stone-lined corridor, a profound realization dawns. The journey is no longer solitary. The multitude of names, now imbued with a spectral presence, have seemingly joined the expedition, their collective whispers and murmurs accompanying the onward progression, as the intricate veins of history are traced toward the subsequent, potentially more perilous, turning point. The formidable abbey walls gradually recede into the distance, ultimately absorbed by the profound stillness of the surrounding countryside. The path ahead, a ribbon of damp earth, is barely discernible, glistening faintly beneath a delicate film of mist. The air carries the subtle, earthy aroma of wet hay commingling with the distant scent of woodlands, a fragrance that drifts languidly from chimneys, hinting at lives lived in patient anticipation of a simple pot boiling over. The journey continues along this rudimentary track until the indistinct outline of a roadside inn materializes from the encroaching darkness, its windows radiating a warm glow like small, vibrant pockets of captured fire. Within the inn's confines, the atmosphere is notably warm, yet tinged with the slightly acrid notes of stale ale, the residue of human exertion, and the faint, lingering pungency of onions past their prime. Overhead, weighty wooden beams sag visibly, deeply scarred by the passage of countless years of smoke and the echoes of hushed laughter. In a secluded corner, a dog slumbers beneath a sturdy bench, its body occasionally twitching, seemingly caught in dreams of an elusive chase. A seat is taken at a table of rough-hewn timber, and an order is placed for bread, cheese, and a wine whose vintage appears to predate the innkeeper's own weary smile. It is within this convivial setting, amidst the rhythmic creak of tankards and the scraping of boots across the floorboards, that a hushed conversation is inadvertently overheard. At an adjacent table sit two men. One possesses a countenance deeply etched by years spent under the open sky, while the other exhibits the slender, fatigued physique of an individual more accustomed to the deceptive comfort of shadows. Their dialogue is deliberately subdued, yet not sufficiently so to elude the trained ears of those adept at listening without betraying their attention. They speak in veiled terms of an unseen hand orchestrating events, of clandestine councils whose deliberations are never formally documented, and of messages conveyed not through conventional parchment, but through the symbolic choice of which banner unfurls above a fortress on a designated feast day. Mainstream historical scholarship frequently dismisses such narratives as mere folklore, the product of idle chatter originating in alehouses, where the pursuit of truth is often as diluted as the beer served. However, an undeniable intentionality permeates the manner in which these men converse, their words deftly avoiding certain names while circling others with the predatory focus of a hawk observing a rabbit warren. A segment of the academic community continues to debate whether the significant political upheavals of the 13th and 14th centuries, characterized by abrupt shifts in alliances and the improbable endurance of specific noble houses, were simply the outcome of fortuitous circumstances or the deliberate manipulation of an organized, unseen influence. The majority of historians tend to favor the explanation of coincidence. Fringe researchers, conversely, meticulously trace these historical movements as if following a shadow map, postulating the existence of an inconspicuous network that quietly guided key figures into positions of power while subtly maneuvering others toward convenient obscurity. The older of the two men emits a single sharp laugh before inclining his head closer to his companion. "Do you truly believe the Pope governs Christendom?" he inquires, his voice possessing just enough resonance to reach the eavesdropping ears. "Only when the true masters grant him leave to do so." His tone is devoid of any genuine mirth, conveying instead the dry satisfaction of an individual fully aware that his pronouncements will be largely dismissed as drunken ramblings by most, but not by all. The ordered bread arrives, still warm and exuding a fragrant aroma, its crust crackling invitingly under one's fingers. The cheese possesses a sharp, almost metallic tang, as though it retains the memory of the blade that portioned it. The wine, when sipped, carries a faint taste of iron and rich earth, prompting a moment of profound contemplation regarding the implications of the overheard conversation. If a hidden hand genuinely exists, whether its origins lie with the Templars, a royal dynasty, or something far more ancient, it would indeed provide an explanation for the peculiar patterns observed in the genealogies scrutinized earlier, particularly the remarkable resilience of certain lineages, which seem to persevere even through eras of devastating plague and incessant warfare. And yet, the possibility remains that one is merely pursuing phantoms amidst the smoke of conjecture. Influence, by its very nature, is elusive, and the annals of history are replete with accidental occurrences that, when viewed from a distance, can deceptively resemble deliberate patterns. Nevertheless, a persistent sensation lingers, much like the subtle aftertaste of wine long after the cup is emptied, suggesting that an intentional force is indeed at play. Upon departing the inn, the mist has intensified, obscuring the road ahead into little more than an indistinct suggestion. The dog, previously observed in the corner, has silently followed, trotting companionably at one side, as if it too harbors a curiosity regarding the ultimate destination of this winding path. The faint, receding laughter of the two men is audible behind, a sound imbued with an unsettling ambiguity. It could be interpreted as a shared jest, or perhaps a veiled warning. The mist grows denser as the journey continues southward, breath visibly clouding in the increasing chill of the air. Somewhere within the undulating folds of the hills ahead, Jerusalem lies in repose, or more precisely, the vivid memory of it persists. The Templars once trod these lands, not amidst these verdant, damp fields, but within a city of radiant sun and ancient stone, where fine dust adhered to the skin and the air was redolent with the fragrances of exotic spices and intense heat. It is toward this historical tableau that the journey now leads, not by the conventional means of ship or horse, but by the deliberate, imaginative ferry of the mind. The sea wind, once cool, gradually warms. The ground beneath one's feet imperceptibly transforms into sun-baked limestone, and the narrow thoroughfares of the ancient city constrict, becoming deep shadows between towering, whitewashed walls. It is midday within the old city, though centuries have long since passed. The vibrant hum of the bustling marketplace ascends. Dates, pomegranates, and figs are meticulously arranged in colorful, towering pyramids. Merchants vociferously call out their wares in a polyglot chorus of Arabic, Greek, and French. One navigates through the dense press of pilgrims, until the Templar compound is discovered, its formidable gates shaded by the colossal dome of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a sacred edifice that the order had controversially appropriated as their primary headquarters. Mainstream historians generally concur. The Templars were far more than a mere military order. They were exceptionally skilled administrators, astute bankers, and, though less frequently acknowledged, meticulous archivists. They maintained extraordinarily detailed records, the kind of documentation capable of preserving far more than straightforward financial ledgers. A segment of scholars continues to engage in rigorous debate regarding whether the deep, subterranean vaults beneath their Jerusalem base were primarily utilized for the storage of material treasures or for something considerably less tangible, sacred relics, sensitive documents, or perhaps even conclusive evidence of bloodlines deemed too perilous to openly declare. Fringe theorists, however, predominantly lean toward the latter proposition. They vividly imagine extensive corridors hewn directly into the bedrock, lined with robust cedar chests bound in iron, their contents safeguarded not by conventional locks, but by inviolable oaths. Concealed within some of these chests, it is hypothesized, might have reposed a genealogy of an antiquity greater than Europe itself, inscribed in a language that the Crusader knights barely comprehended. It is widely recounted that the very walls of these ancient vaults maintained such a remarkably consistent temperature that bread could be preserved within them for weeks without succumbing to staleness. This fact, while perhaps lacking a mystical quality, is nonetheless imbued with its own peculiar poetry. The air within these subterranean chambers would have been perpetually cool, utterly still, and thick with the distinct mineral aroma of ancient stone. Footsteps, when they occurred, would echo just sufficiently to impart a sense of companionship, even to an individual utterly alone. One pictures a knight, clad in armor rendered silent by the ambient heat, descending the worn steps, bearing a parcel meticulously wrapped in linen. He carefully places it within a chest, secures the lid, and then, with a deliberate motion, traces an enigmatic symbol into the fine dust before turning to depart. The precise moment remains unrecorded, the object itself unnamed, yet the gesture itself feels profoundly intentional, as if the knight intuitively understood that the act would resonate through time far longer than any mere description of the item ever could. Ironically, the one crucial element the Templars proved utterly incapable of safeguarding was their own precarious future. When the formidable order met its precipitous downfall in 1307, the deep vaults beneath Jerusalem had long since fallen beyond their reach. Some adherents to historical theory contend that the Templars had already emptied these repositories before their final departure from the city, dispatching their most precious cargo to locations north and west. Others, adopting a more skeptical stance, suggest that the fabled treasure was simply a carefully constructed myth, a potent recruiting tool, or an exaggerated rumor designed to intimidate adversaries and cultivate unwavering loyalty. Nevertheless, it remains remarkably curious how swiftly those vaults vanished from official historical records, almost as if the very earth itself had conspired to seal itself over them. One cannot definitively assert whether the elusive bloodline currently being pursued ever passed through this hallowed location. However, if it did, then for a period it would have found sanctuary here in the profound darkness, arguably safer than within any grand cathedral. meticulously watched over by individuals who held secrecy in as high regard as their own salvation. Upon re-emerging into the harsh glare of daylight, the sun feels excessively bright, and the clamor of the marketplace proves overwhelmingly loud. Yet somewhere beneath one's feet, the imagination conjures the air still cool and still, the chests either perfectly preserved in their original positions, or their very absence speaking with an equally resounding historical resonance. The pervasive mist of the observer's own century slowly returns, gradually eclipsing Jerusalem's ancient sun, and once more, the journeyer stands upon a damp, winding road nestled within the hills. The inn's canine companion had forged onward, its muzzle pressed to the earth, tracking a scent perceptible only to its keen senses. The travelers followed in its wake, pondering whether their journey constituted an exploration of history, or if instead they were being pursued by its inexorable current. The path gracefully curved towards the littoral, carrying with it the subtle, saline aroma of the ocean, a fragrance that permeates woolen fabrics and aged leather, infuses the interiors of antique chests, and clings to the narratives of mariners who ventured into horizons more distant than they ever confessed. Within the satchel at their side reposed a charcoal impression from an artifact discovered in a coastal chapel the preceding evening, a time-worn seal etched into the stone lintel positioned above the entrance. Its intricate details had been smoothed by time, save for the distinct crimson emblem at its core. The Templar seal is widely recognized in its quintessential representation: two knights sharing a single steed, an iconography typically interpreted by historians as a symbol of austerity, fraternal solidarity, or both. Yet, much like individuals, seals exhibited variations, and in specific maritime outposts, they bore more enigmatic insignia: interlocked circlets, a chalice partially concealed by a blade, or even a sunburst transfixed by an arrow. Mainstream scholars account for these as regional artistic flourishes, the creations of artisans more intent on gratifying their benefactors than upholding institutional uniformity. Unorthodox commentators, however, perceive in them a covert navigational system, each inscription a coordinate, each divergence a cryptic indication. Some even go so far as to assert that particular seals correspond to locales where something significant was secreted: sacred relics, intricate maps, or fragmented records which, if meticulously pieced together, might unveil the authentic narrative of an ancestral lineage. They rotated the impression within their hands, the charcoal lines lightly transferring onto their fingertips. The design here was distinctive and unusual. The familiar cross resided within a circle, yet the circle was interrupted at its lower circumference by what could be construed as either a droplet or a tear. Some academics continue to debate whether this motif represents a fortuitous consequence of weathering or a deliberate emblematic representation. Speculations proliferate: a drop of Christ's blood, a clandestine sign of lineage, or perhaps merely the stonemason's artistic caprice after countless hours hunched over his chisel. Beyond the chapel, the maritime breeze agitated a series of wooden prayer boards, their chords groaning in the saline atmosphere. The boards gently collided, creating a sound akin to subdued commendation for a narrative remembered solely by them. The texture of the seal rubbing felt abrasive against their digit, the kind of particulate residue that lingers beneath one's nails long after thorough cleansing. A subtle, yet persistent memento. And here emerged the first subtle resonance of paradox. For if the seal was intended to obscure something, it had instead transformed into a luminous guide for the inquisitive. They were not the initial individuals to trace its contours, nor would they be the last. The innkeeper from 2 nights prior recounted observing a Frenchman transcribe the identical motif into his notebook, murmuring in an unfamiliar tongue that the local inhabitants could not identify. The Frenchman subsequently vanished. Perhaps this represents the inherent nature of such clues, to entice investigators into an incessant cycle where the allure of subsequent revelation is perpetually just beyond reach, compelling continued pursuit. It mirrored the pattern they had observed in the genealogies, the sensation that someone had intentionally left just enough of a trail to perpetuate the inquiry, but never sufficient to provide definitive resolution. The oceanic surge was advancing now, the resounding cadence of the waves swelling within the interstices between the chapel walls. In the misty spray that permeated the unsealed portal, the rubbing's lines appeared more pronounced, more distinct, as if the water itself were striving to emphasize their contours. They reinserted it into their leather pouch, acutely aware that carrying it felt akin to aligning themselves with a contentious proposition they did not yet fully comprehend. The dog awaited them by the road, its tail held low, its auricles inclined towards the ocean as though it perceived something beyond their own faculties. They followed, their boots leaving ephemeral indentations in the damp earth, the fractured circlet of the emblem persistently revolving in their thoughts. Somewhere ahead, they surmised, would be the subsequent indicator. And beyond it, perhaps the underlying purpose behind these various inscriptions in the first place. The road constricted once more, this time meandering into a depression where the atmosphere seemed more temperate, as if the haze had attenuated, allowing a soft, golden luminescence to permeate. They passed fields delineated by modest dry stone barriers and clumps of populous trees that rustled with the hushed, intonatory quality of ancient confidants in the breeze. At the far end of the valley, an ancestral residence emerged, partially defensible, partially ornamental, with towers just high enough to assert a presence, but not so elevated as to suggest the owners anticipated an actual military blockade. Inside, the imposing chamber exuded a subtle fragrance of beeswax and rosewater, though beneath it persisted the earthy aroma of old wood and moist masonry. The tapestries adorning the walls were clearly intended to captivate visitors, rather than merely to insulate against the cold, vibrant, intricately detailed, replete with hunting scenes and courtly processions. However, in a secluded corner, one hung that diverged somewhat from the prevailing motif. It depicted a woman draped in an immaculate shroud, her robe richly embellished with metallic filaments of gold. She stood within a walled garden, one hand resting on a chalice, the other concealed within the voluminous folds of her attire. Behind her, subtle and readily missed, was a small crimson emblem integrated into the trellised framework of the garden gate. Mainstream art historians might explain this as an allegorical figure, perhaps ecclesia, the embodiment of the ecclesiastical institution, or even a generic medieval queen. But unorthodox commentators are seldom satisfied with metaphorical interpretations. Some speculate that this is not merely an emblem, but a portrait rendered with meticulous precision of a woman whose identity had to be disguised within a context deemed innocuous for general viewing. Some scholars still argue whether such imagery could have been used to embed concealed communications overtly. After all, the Templars were renowned for their discretion when unambiguous proclamation posed excessive peril. A hidden queen, connected by consanguinity to a venerable ancestry, could be perpetuated in this medium, not as a ruler in the chronicles, but as an apocryphal noblewoman woven into a fabric. The texture of the weave felt rough against their digits when the steward's gaze was averted. The pigmented filaments emanating a subtle, particulate aroma of cloth that had been stored and revealed across epochs. The gold thread captured the illumination in a manner that nearly caused the sacred vessel to appear undulatory, as though liquid were moving inside it. It was an optical illusion, of course, or so they reassured themselves, because believing otherwise would mean contemplating a cascade of consequences that could dismantle a significant portion of established historical understanding concerning this period. There existed a paradoxical situation here meriting contemplation. If the tapestry indeed constituted a clue, it had persisted specifically due to its perceived inconsequentiality. While vast repositories of knowledge were incinerated, this piece of fabric had resided unobtrusively within reception chambers, applauded for its artistry, yet disregarded for its profound significance. It had endured beyond monarchs, pestilences, and societal transformations merely by virtue of its aesthetic appeal. The steward uttered a courteous, clearing sound, the globally recognized signal for prolonged scrutiny. They retreated a pace, providing an innocuous observation about the quality of the embroidery. He nodded and commenced a pre-prepared discourse about the hunting tapestries instead, gently guiding them from the secluded alcove as if no moment of profound implication had transpired between them. Outside, the solar orb had descended sufficiently to cast elongated, golden-hued penumbras across the valley. The dog waited by the gate, its nostrils quivering as if it had also detected the aroma of an elusive secret embedded within the textile filaments. They continued their perambulation, and though the tapestry was now considerably removed from their present location, the image of the veiled woman lingered silently, tenaciously, like an ephemeral apparition encountered in slumber that resists fading from memory. The valley road ascended to elevated terrain, where the atmosphere became crisper and more invigorating, carrying the resinous fragrance of coniferous sap. By late afternoon, the skyline was adorned with the luminous cupola of a grand basilica, its steeple, a slender obelisk, piercing the leaden firmament. A carillon resonated upon their arrival, not the complete, exultant chorus of feast days, but a measured, intentional reverberation that felt more resembling an invocation rather than a festivity. Within, the cathedral exuded the aromas of sacred resin and moist masonry, accompanied by the subtle ferrous odor of candle holders that had been burnished with greater frequency than the sacred linens were cleansed. In an ancillary sanctuary, partially obscured by a sculpted marble partition, sat a vitrine encasing a rolled manuscript. Its vellum had aged to the hue of ancient osseous matter, its peripheries gently coiling akin to digits. Beside it, an unassuming placard plainly stated, Papal Bull 1312. Mainstream historians identify this as Vox in Excelso, the edict through which Pontiff Clement V disbanded the Knights Templar. It is a meticulous, ceremonious document, its phraseology cloaked in bureaucratic formality, and yet, scrutinizing it here in this dim chapel, one is compelled to observe its lacunae. There is no overt denunciation of heterodoxy, no unmediated charge of protecting prescribed artifacts, No enumeration of alleged transgressions, only an unremarkable assertion that the organization's notoriety had rendered its perpetuation untenable. Some academics continue to debate if Clement proceeded from apprehension concerning monarch Philip IV of France, who was submerged in financial obligations to the Knights Templar, or whether the pontiff possessed his own concealed information, perhaps even a clandestine concordat with select brethren privy to excessive knowledge. Unorthodox commentators are inclined to envision an implicit covenant, the fraternity's ostensible annihilation in exchange for the unobtrusive preservation of its most zealously protected arcana. The scroll's script was meticulously rendered, the pigment retaining its intensity across 600 years. A singular passage, notably, appeared almost perfunctory, simply stating that specific assets and adherents were to be relocated at the discretion of the apostolic authority, as seen fit. An expression sufficiently pliable to encompass a pack animal's conveyance laden with sacred artifacts or a kinship group under protective custody. There is a subtle irony present here too, if one scrutinizes it. History records the Templars as annihilated, disbanded, disgraced, yet in the penumbra of that official disbandment, some may have departed completely unmolested, shielded by the precise pontiff who denounced them. Administrative protocol, it would appear, can serve as an exceptionally effective disguise. The Grand Cathedral's interior illumination began to wane as an increasing density of clouds gathered overhead, marking the afternoon's slow descent into that crepuscular interval when the vibrant hues of stained glass transmute into a muted, obscure palette. The ancient parchment, carefully ensconced behind its unblemished protective pane, had resided in this very spot for countless decades, perhaps even centuries. Casual sightseers would cast a fleeting glance, perusing the accompanying descriptive label, before diverting their attention to the more visually arresting and colorful altarpieces adorning the sanctuary. Few, indeed, were the individuals who truly observed the meticulous pleats in the aged vellum or detected the subtle, lingering aroma of the beeswax seal that still adhered to its surface, a testament to its distant past. As the observers retreated into the vast expanse of the nave, the sonorous pealing of the bells resumed, now at a more deliberate cadence, their profound resonance seemingly absorbed by the ancient stone architecture, akin to how vital moisture permeates parched earth. Conclusive revelations had, of course, eluded them. Their findings amounted to little more than sufficient impetus to persist in their arduous journey. Yet, such was the inherent nature of this particular quest. Each successive stage culminated not in a definitive resolution, but rather in a compelling new rationale to embark upon the subsequent one. Beyond the hallowed confines, the canine companion patiently awaited, nestled within the encompassing shadow cast by the towering spire, its ears pressed flat against the persistent wind. It seamlessly joined their progress, moving with an almost preternatural silence, as though it had itself deciphered the profound implications of the papal bull and determined that they should not confront such weighty matters in solitude. Nightfall enveloped them as they reached the periphery of a modest market town, one of those charming locales whose cobblestone thoroughfares appeared to retain the day's residual warmth, just long enough to foster the illusion that winter's embrace remained a distant prospect. The sources of illumination here were not the opulent candelabras of a grand cathedral, but rather unpretentious iron cages, their light emanating a rich, uneven, buttery glow that swayed gently with each passing gust of wind. The soft, metallic clinking of chains could be heard as diligent shopkeepers secured their wooden shutters, while the faint, subtly acrid fragrance of spilled ale wafted enticingly from the threshold of a nearby public house. Their intended destination was precisely such an establishment, an inviting tavern named the Three Pilgrims. This was a low-beamed hostelry, its ceiling so markedly bowed with age that even the tallest among them found it necessary to incline their heads. Its sturdy timber walls were adorned with a collection of smoke-darkened portraits, depicting a varied array of figures, solemn saints, prosperous merchants, and one particularly self-satisfied-looking gentleman clad in a white mantle faintly emblazoned with a crimson cross. The innkeeper, with an air of casual dismissal, insisted that the man was merely an ordinary old pilgrim. However, the figure's distinctive posture and his piercing, narrow eyes made it difficult to resist the impression that he was mentally tabulating something, perhaps a tally of coins or a list of significant names. Within this rustic setting, they encountered an archivist, not the stereotypical robed monastic scholar or an erudite Oxford academic, but a slender woman whose fingers bore the telltale stains of ink and whose laughter resonated like the brisk rustling of pages being turned too rapidly. She had been diligently endeavoring to trace the ultimate disposition of Templar assets following the Order's suppression, a formidable undertaking she candidly likened to the elusive pursuit of a fox through a dense fog. The commonly accepted historical narrative posited that a substantial portion of the Templars' considerable wealth and extensive landholdings had been transferred to the Knights Hospitaller, another prominent military order sanctioned by the Church. Yet, as they shared mugs of steaming spiced wine, she leaned conspiratorially closer, recounting tales of peculiar anomalies, minor estates inexplicably vanished within labyrinthine bureaucratic records, vessels that ostensibly never reached their designated ports, and inventory ledgers from which entire pages had been conspicuously excised. Certain mainstream historians contended that such irregularities were entirely unremarkable, asserting that medieval record-keeping was notoriously imprecise, akin to the accuracy of an inebriated archer's aim. However, proponents of fringe theories advanced the notion that these lacunae were, in fact, deliberately engineered, the calculated outcome of a clandestine network that covertly relocated assets beyond the pontiff's direct jurisdiction. The archivist evinced a knowing smirk as she recounted a particularly perplexing ledger originating from a port in La Rochelle. This document meticulously itemized provisions for 30 men and 1 passenger of importance, all loaded onto a ship that, according to official accounts, never actually departed. "I never left," she reiterated, rolling her eyes with palpable disbelief. "The vessel simply remained moored indefinitely." Of course. Their gaze instinctively drifted back to the self-satisfied pilgrim depicted in the painting. His lips were curved in a subtle, knowing smile, as if he had already been privy to this very narrative 6 centuries prior and found it utterly diverting. Beneath the table, the dog settled into a comfortable curl at their feet, its head resting placidly on its paws. Periodically, it would open a single eye, as though silently verifying their continued attentiveness. Outside, a storm had begun to unleash a spattering of rain against the window shutters, which only served to amplify the cozy warmth emanating from the hearth. They lingered, allowing the archivist's intriguing disclosures to thoroughly permeate their thoughts. The unspoken irony of the situation was that every individual present in the room, even the ostensibly oblivious innkeeper, was engaged in a collective pretense of not noticing how swiftly the convivial atmosphere had transmuted from casual discourse to something verging on an intimate confession. While the words bloodline or relic remained unarticulated, their potent implications hung palpably in the air, much like an unspoken, weighty toast. Upon their departure, the rain had diminished to a delicate mist. The cobbled thoroughfares were slick with moisture, reflecting the lantern light in shimmering, distorted golden lines. Somewhere in their wake, the archivist secured her door, the distinct sound of the iron latch falling into place echoing through the hushed street. They continued their journey, acutely aware of the profound weight not only of what she had explicitly stated, but perhaps even more so, of what she had pointedly left unsaid. The trail they pursued now felt simultaneously more elusive and yet, paradoxically, more intensely alive, as if they were under the scrutiny not merely of a single pair of eyes, but of countless watchful gazes, those rendered in paint, those belonging to living beings, and perhaps even those remembered from distant eras. By the advent of dawn, the storm had thoroughly cleansed the streets. The air was remarkably crisp, possessing a bracing quality that rendered each breath a sensation of renewed vitality. They followed the winding road out of the town until the familiar cobblestones gradually yielded to firmly packed earth, and the landscape unfurled into expansive fields delicately laced with hoarfrost. In the ethereal pale light, every individual blade of grass appeared to be exquisitely edged in silver, and their own footsteps resonated with an unnerving loudness, conveying the distinct impression of intruding upon something profoundly ancient and deeply private. Their guide for the day was a shepherd, a man who steadfastly maintained that his lineage had tended flocks in this very region since a time predating the bad years, a nebulous term that, depending on his inflection, could variously denote periods of famine, plague, or oppressive taxation. He walked with the measured gait of one accustomed to traversing vast distances, his shepherd's crook tapping rhythmically against the ground, serving almost as a punctuation mark to his silent progress. The low hills towards which he directed them appeared unremarkable to the untrained eye, merely gentle undulations in the terrain, softened and rounded by centuries of continuous grass cover. However, to him, and to those intimately acquainted with the land, the deeper, more ancient narratives, these were not simply hills. They were, in fact, mounds, venerable burial mounds. The conventional historical understanding of such formations was straightforward enough. Across the European continent, similar mounds frequently signified prehistoric or early medieval sepulchres. Archaeological excavations beneath them had yielded a diverse array of findings, ranging from the skeletal remains of ancient warriors to the impressive discovery of entire ships. Yet, a persistent fringe theory insisted that, within this specific valley, at least one particular mound concealed something far more enigmatic. Not bones, but a meticulously constructed vault. And not a treasure trove of Viking gold or the material wealth of a Saxon king, but rather an archive of documents, charters, genealogies, and perhaps even seals of authority whose revelations could potentially destabilize certain contemporary dynastic claims. Their shepherd guide responded to this suggestion with a soft chuckle, a dry, brittle sound reminiscent of a twig snapping. Some folk, he observed, imagine the earth is much like a cupboard. You simply open it and retrieve whatever you desire. He, however, subscribed to the ancestral belief, passed down through generations, that the mound's true contents could only ever be legitimately claimed by an individual who already possessed an inherent understanding of their underlying truth. A profound paradox, indeed, a secret that remained undiscoverable until one had, in essence, already grasped its essence. Scholars exhibited a sharp divergence of opinion on this matter. A segment of the academic community entirely dismissed the notion, emphasizing that no archaeological excavation had ever unearthed such vaults. Others countered that the very absence of concrete proof was precisely the crux of the argument. Either the mounds had remained inviolate and unexamined, or whatever had once been interred within them had been meticulously removed long ago, silently and clandestinely, perhaps even amidst the widespread chaos that followed the dramatic dissolution of the Templar order. As they ascended, the verdant grass gradually receded, giving way to exposed patches of ancient stone, which felt cold and perilously slick underfoot. The wind, though thin, carried a faint, distant aroma of wood smoke, presumably originating from some unseen farmhouse nestled in the valley below. Yet, at their elevated position, it bore only the clean, mineral scent of the earth itself, an aroma that was pure, elemental, and stubbornly silent. At the very crest of the mound, the shepherd paused. His flock of sheep grazed idly nearby, utterly oblivious to the inherent human propensity to imbue every topographical irregularity and every fleeting shadow with intricate myths and profound historical narratives. It was then that they discerned something peculiar, a subtle circle composed of smaller stones, partially embedded in the ground, scarcely discernible unless the sunlight struck them at precisely the right angle. They appeared like the ethereal remnant of an ancient edifice, perhaps an archaic waymarker, or possibly a communal hearth, or perhaps they mused with a fleeting spark of dry humor. These were medieval real estate boundary markers, bearing an invisible inscription, "Vault commences here. Trespassers will be prosecuted." The shepherd, with an almost ritualistic reverence, did not step inside the stone circle, nor did they. Instead, they stood respectfully at its periphery, experiencing the profound, almost uncanny stillness that pervaded the place. There was no melodic bird song, no buzzing of insects, merely the gentle, rhythmic shuffle of grazing sheep and the long, empty sigh of the wind. From this vantage point, the panoramic view extended for miles, punctuated by distant church spires and verdant hedgerows. It was effortless to envision an individual from centuries past deliberately selecting this elevated location for its strategic overlook, for the way the first rays of sunrise would gild the expansive landscape like a painter's masterful brushstroke. It was considerably more challenging to conceive that they had intended for those present, now, in this very spot, to ponder whether beneath their boots lay a truth too fragile and profound to ever be exposed to the open air. During their descent, they observed a small, intricate carving etched into a stone partially obscured by a thick layer of moss. It depicted a crude cross, its arms noticeably uneven, with the lower limb extending longer than the others. This distinctive shape, they intuitively sensed, would reappear in their journey, though certainly not in an anticipated location. That singular, uneven cross remained imprinted upon their minds, much like a half-remembered melody. They refrained from discussing it immediately, as if articulating its presence might somehow shatter the delicate spell it had cast. Instead, they allowed the winding road to carry them onward, towards those mysterious lands where river mist ascended in ethereal pale ribbons, and the haunting tolling of church bells resonated, seemingly without any visible human agency. The town they eventually entered possessed the weary, resigned grace of a place that had borne witness to the rise and fall of countless regimes. Long curling scrolls of peeling plaster detached from ancient facades, revealing the older, more enduring layers of brick and stone beneath. At its heart lay a central square, graced by a fountain and dominated by a church whose imposing doors were so massive and formidable as to suggest a profound reluctance to ever be opened. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy and redolent with the rich, commingled scents of beeswax and ancient stone dust. The conventional historical record affirmed that this particular church had been erected in the late 12th century by Cistercian monks, an austere order renowned for their commitment to simplicity, their distinctive plain white habits, and their exceptional aptitude for land management. However, it was precisely at this juncture that the fringe narrative subtly inserted itself. The church's altar was conspicuously not situated in its architecturally conventional position. Instead of being squarely aligned beneath the apse, it was notably offset, almost as though it had been deliberately relocated, either to obscure or to unveil something of profound significance beneath its new placement. Certain local oral traditions steadfastly maintain that the original architects deliberately oriented the edifice in harmony with specific celestial phenomena. Other hushed accounts allude to an even more ancient foundation lying beneath the church's central aisle, conceivably antedating the arrival of Christianity in this particular locale. Academics engage in fervent discussions, vigorously contending whether the structure's irregular architectural configuration signifies multiple distinct construction phases, mere human fallibility, or an intentional act of concealment. It is precisely at this point, bathed in the subdued luminescence of a solitary candle flickering at a peripheral altar, that the observers once more discern it, the distinctive asymmetrical cross etched into the timber of a confessional panel. Its lower arm extends disproportionately, and the hand appears crudely rendered. The mark is exceedingly faint, almost imperceptible unless precisely illuminated by a shifting light source. The individuals exchange silent, meaningful glances, their unspoken debate revolving around whether this recurring motif represents a mere fortuity or a deliberate continuation of some deeper pattern. Their exploration leads them into an adjacent side chapel, where the atmosphere feels notably colder, as if the very stone walls are gently expelling ancient breaths. The vibrant stained glass above portrays not a conventional biblical narrative, but rather a robust vessel adorned with a red cross upon its sail. The craftsmanship is sufficiently precise to allow for its identification with specific 14th century cogs. Maritime craft known to have navigated from La Rochelle, the final significant French port of the Knights Templar, before their venerable order was tragically dissolved. One is strongly inclined to romanticize the notion of a clandestine fleet, laden with sacred relics and invaluable archives, slipping away under the cloak of darkness, destined for havens far beyond the punitive reach of the papacy. Some revisionist historians assert these ships successfully reached the shores of Scotland, while others posit their arrival in Portugal. A particularly audacious hypothesis even suggests their voyage across the vast Atlantic to the New World, centuries prior to Columbus's renowned expedition. A small, self-aware part of the observers' minds, however, ponders the mundane reality. How many of these vessels were simply loaded with preserved fish and ordinary merchandise, their iconic Red Cross sails conveying nothing more enigmatic than commercial goods and the accumulated wisdom of the high seas? Nevertheless, the chapel appears to resonate with a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration, as if steadfastly guarding the essence of some long-interred truth. The church's parish caretaker eventually discovers the visitors still lingering within the chapel's confines. He is an elderly gentleman whose pronounced curvature of the spine vividly suggests a lifetime dedicated to the humble task of sweeping floors. When the visitors inquire about the ship depicted in the stained glass, he offers a dismissive shrug, explaining it away as merely an antique family escutcheon belonging to a long-departed benefactor. His vocal inflection, however, possesses the slightest upward curve, a subtle auditory tell just pronounced enough to incite suspicion that he himself does not entirely subscribe to his own casual explanation. Upon their departure, the atmospheric mist has intensified considerably, effectively shrouding the distant perimeters of the town square. The resonant pealing of the church bells commences anew, yet no one is visible manipulating the ropes within the belfry. And somewhere deep within the valley they had traversed that morning, a scattered assembly of sheep-shifts with an inexplicable unease upon an elevated mound, a feature that might conceivably conceal a burial site, a subterranean vault, or indeed, nothing at all. The pervasive mist follows their progress, a persistent companion that steadfastly declines formal introduction. By the time the travelers arrive at the subsequent village, the mist has congealed into an almost palpable entity, a cool, moist shroud draped intimately over the earth's contours. The thoroughfares here appear notably narrower, the roof lines lower, imparting the impression that the dwellings themselves are inclining inward, perhaps to confidentially exchange ancient secrets. The sound precedes the sight, the deliberate rhythmic groan of a venerable mill wheel rotating on the flowing stream, the water's steady impact against the wooden paddles echoing a cadence more ancient than human recollection. This timeless sound draws them inexorably towards a low-slung bridge where the distinct aroma of damp moss and aged iron intermingles with the faintest, almost ethereal hint of wood smoke. This particular locale lays a compelling claim to historical eminence. Archival records indicate its former designation as a crucial staging post for devout pilgrims embarking on the arduous journey towards Santiago de Compostela. It served as a modest respite, offering secure lodging and basic sustenance in the form of freshly baked bread. Yet the more unconventional narratives, the fringe whispers, speak of a different reality, that certain pilgrims conveyed more than mere walking sticks and rosary beads. They carried encrypted messages, ingeniously encoded within the language of symbols meticulously carved onto roadside crosses and various other markers. The group steps into a compact tavern whose overhead beams are not merely painted, but genuinely blackened by the accumulated soot of centuries of hearth fires. The interior space is redolent with the comforting fragrances of fermenting yeast and aged oak, while the tables bear the smooth, polished patina imparted by generations of elbows leaning upon them. Behind the service counter, A woman whose hair resembles a lustrous silver braid woven from river water gracefully pours a wine that carries the subtle, fleeting essence of plums. A segment of historians actively debates whether such public houses functioned as informal nexus points within a covert, encrypted communication network. Mainstream academic opinion, however, tends to dismiss these conjectures with a scoff, citing the scarcity of concrete evidence beyond a handful of unusually marked doorframes. Conversely, fringe theorists diligently highlight the persistent reappearance of specific carvings. A meticulously rendered compass rose, a hand with two fingers extended in a particular gesture, and a highly stylized fish whose caudal fin points unmistakably towards an unseen destination. In a secluded corner of the tavern, precisely carved into a substantial beam just above eye level, the observers once again discern it, the uneven cross. This iteration is neither painted nor decorative, but simply cut into the wood with a raw, almost impatient quality that feels surprisingly contemporary. Its elongated lower arm dips slightly, conveying the impression that the original carver prioritized mere presence over perfect geometric symmetry. A shared, knowing chuckle ripples through the group at this realization. How many generations of conspiracy-minded wanderers, they muse, have occupied this very spot, gazing intently at the same inconspicuous notch in the timber, meticulously weaving it into an elaborate saga of concealed riches. Perhaps, they consider, the local miller carved it absently on a dreary, rain-soaked afternoon, and now, centuries later, it functions as an irresistible magnet for their own layered hopes and speculative narratives. The tavern keeper then recounts the existence of an ancient stone bridge situated beyond the village, where the main thoroughfare appears to bifurcate. She describes it with a faint, knowing half-smile, as if the road itself possesses an intentionality, bending towards some preordained purpose. Following her precise directions, the travelers locate it, a venerable crossing whose robust arches ascend gracefully, reminiscent of the slumbering forms of ancient beasts. The stream flowing beneath is shallow, yet the individual stones forming the bridge are colossal in scale. Roman in origin, according to conventional historical records, although some scholars posit they were ingeniously repurposed from an even more archaic construction site. Beneath the bridge, specifically on its upstream side, the observers discover a carving partially obscured by encroaching moss. It depicts another ship, though this one is noticeably smaller, equipped with a single square sail. Intriguingly, its prow is oriented upstream, directly away from the distant sea. Fringe theory proponents delight in such minute details. Why, they ponder, would a ship face inland unless its depiction formed an integral part of some symbolic cartography, a cryptic map that hinted at expeditions not across expansive oceans, but deeply into the very heart of the land itself? Other, more pragmatic voices dismiss this as mere mason's caprice, no more significant than a casual doodle in the margin of an ancient manuscript. The group traverses the bridge with deliberate slowness, their footsteps muffled by the pervasive dampness. The mist presses in closely, subtly softening the contours of the world, until only the gentle murmur of flowing water and a faint metallic tang in the air persist. On the opposing bank, the road does indeed diverge as described. One path winds upward towards the distant hills, while the other leads into a forest so intensely dense, that the discernible track vanishes entirely after only a few initial steps. They elect to follow the forest path, though a premonitory instinct suggests that the distinctive uneven cross will invariably be awaiting them somewhere ahead, perhaps etched into ancient bark or embedded within a weathered stone, seemingly grinning at their persistent willingness to pursue the elusive trails indicated by shadows. The forest envelops them with the gradual, deliberate intimacy of a slow inhalation. Overhead, branches interlace densely, forming a verdant canopy until the sky above becomes a mere pale recollection. Each step sinks softly into the moist, hushed carpet of decaying leaf mold, the air rich with the deep, earthy fragrance of decomposition mingled with fresh rain. Somewhere unseen within the depths, a woodpecker maintains a steady rhythm against a hollow tree trunk, its sharp, staccato tapping akin to the polite yet insistent knock of a messenger who steadfastly refuses to divulge his identity. They proceed along what feels less like a defined path and more like an intuitive suggestion, the subtle guidance that the ancient land offers exclusively to those who have cultivated the ability to truly listen. The trees here are immensely old, their forms gnarled and twisted, their bases broad and sturdy, with bark that folds and furrows like the deeply lined skin of venerable hands. And upon one of these ancient trunks, they discover it once more, the uneven cross. This particular rendition is carved with noticeably greater depth, conveying the impression that the carver possessed both clear intention and ample time for its creation. Conventional historical accounts inform us that this expansive forest once served as a royal hunting ground for a medieval count, who meticulously levied taxes on every boar and stag successfully taken from its abundant depths. However, the realm of fringe lore posits that these very royal hunts covertly facilitated other, more clandestine activities, secret rendezvous between knights and itinerant pilgrims who, rather than seeking penance, were more likely functioning as discreet couriers. Some theorists even speculate that valuable goods, perhaps even ancient artifacts, were deliberately concealed here in plain sight, ingeniously disguised as mundane provisions destined for the kitchens of the Count's imposing castle. The academic debate surrounding these theories is notably spirited. Absurd, declare the more cautious and skeptical voices, asserting unequivocally, there exists no tangible proof beyond mere tavern gossip and the embellishments of later romantic novels. Yet other scholars emphatically point to the remarkable persistence of these identical symbols. The distinctive uneven cross, the ship oriented inland, appearing consistently in geographical locations where the official presence or footprint of the Knights Templar should, by all historical accounts, never have extended. The group pauses within a small natural clearing where the ground gently slopes inward, forming a shallow, bowl-like depression. The profound silence here is truly remarkable, the kind that heightens one's awareness of their own heartbeat. In the clearing's precise center, a flat stone slab rests horizontally, its surface intricately mottled with various lichens. To their surprise, faint lines are meticulously carved into it, a series of concentric circles, almost perfectly mimicking the ripples created on a placid body of water. A dry, private jest passes silently among them. Perhaps, they muse, it is nothing more than the world's most ancient cheeseboard, inadvertently abandoned after an evening picnic. But then again, the distinctive circular patterns evoke a memory from earlier in their journey, those enigmatic designs observed in the chapel floor back in the coastal town. The very patterns they had suspected were far more than mere decorative elements. The air thickens perceptibly with that peculiar stillness, a palpable tension that hovers delicately between the precipice of a profound revelation and the mundane comfort of simple dismissal. They meticulously brush away some of the accumulated moss and discover a minuscule channel incised into the stone's edge, as if specifically designed to collect water or some other liquid. Was it a libation stone, an ancient altar, or merely an exceedingly inefficient bird bath? As they engage in this spirited debate, a sudden gust of wind sweeps through the surrounding trees, dislodging a delicate shower of water droplets. The resulting sound is exquisitely subtle, almost akin to whispered applause. It serves as a poignant reminder that they are never the inaugural visitors to this sacred space. Others have undoubtedly knelt, stood, murmured their secrets, and departed, carrying their own unique interpretations into the ever-thickening fog of history. From this vantage point, the path once again diverges. One route leads deeper into the increasingly shadowed forest, while the other beckons towards a faint, distant glimmer of light. They choose to follow the light, and as they proceed, the forest gradually begins to thin until they emerge onto a ridge offering a panoramic view of a narrow valley below. A shimmering ribbon of water meanders gracefully between cultivated fields, its surface catching the pale, intermittent sunlight. And there, partially obscured at a bend in the waterway, stands a substantial edifice of stone and slate, a mill noticeably larger than the one encountered in the previous village. A slow, deliberate wheel turns, and for a fleeting, strange moment, the observers experience a sensation of having traveled backward in time, rather than merely through space. They collectively decide to descend into the valley. As our journey progresses and we descend further, the rich, earthy aroma of the dense woodland gradually dissipates, yielding to the crisp, invigorating fragrance of the flowing river. The ancient water wheel continues its mournful, rhythmic groan, a sound that has echoed through these valleys for ages. Yet now, its steady cadence is punctuated by the sharp, metallic ring of chisels impacting stone, signaling the presence of diligent labor. Drawing nearer, we observe an elderly man, his gaze lifting from the block he meticulously shapes. His eyes, the hue of glacial river ice, hold an unsettling depth, while his hands bear the indelible marks of countless nicks and deep calluses, testaments to a lifetime of toil. He greets us not with surprise, but with an almost preordained certainty. "You're following the marks," he pronounces, his statement carrying the weight of an unquestionable truth rather than a query. We exchange fleeting glances, a subtle acknowledgement of the unspoken, as the ethereal mist that had enveloped us earlier seems to cling not to the air, but to the subtle space between his cryptic utterance and our burgeoning thoughts. The venerable mason, with a deliberate motion, lays aside his implement and extends an inviting hand, beckoning us to enter the venerable structure of the mill. Instantly, the very essence of the air undergoes a profound transformation. It cools perceptibly, laden now with the complex, mingled scents of fine stone dust, damp, seasoned timber, and the faint, sweet tang of freshly ground grain. Sunlight, fractured and diffused, penetrates through narrow, strategically placed slits in the ancient wall, illuminating the countless motes of dust suspended in the air, which drift and spiral like a celestial cascade of slow-falling stars. Outside, the colossal wheel sighs and groans in its perpetual, unyielding cycle, an organic sound, reminiscent of the deep, ancient breath of some colossal creature that has resided within these hallowed confines for untold centuries. Within, our attention is drawn to a series of subtle, almost hesitant carvings etched into the sturdy wooden beams. At first glance, these impressions might easily be dismissed as mere incidental marks left by the tools of construction. However, upon closer inspection, a distinct pattern begins to emerge, revealing recurring motifs, an uneven cross, a graceful ship with its sails meticulously furled, and notably, a new symbol, a star encapsulated within a perfect circle. This last emblem, in particular, arrests our breath. We recall having encountered its spectral presence before, subtly concealed within the intricate mosaic of the chapel floor, back on the distant coast, and faintly, yet unmistakably, etched upon the weathered stone slab we discovered in the secluded forest clearing. Mainstream historical accounts invariably portray these venerable mills as the pulsating heartbeats of medieval rural communities, typically owned by powerful local lords and operated by generations of skilled laborers, much like our present host. Yet, a fascinating array of fringe accounts posits a more clandestine role, claiming that certain mills, particularly those strategically positioned along vital waterways, functioned as covert listening posts, places where coded messages could be discreetly exchanged, perhaps hidden within a handful of grain or a scrap of parchment tucked into a humble flour sack. One such intriguing theory even ventures so far as to suggest that some millers were, in fact, disguised Templar initiates, entrusted with the crucial task of overseeing vital supplies destined for enigmatic voyages that were never intended to be formally documented or publicly acknowledged. The academic contention surrounding these assertions is, predictably, quite pronounced. Romantic nonsense, grumble the traditionalist archivists, who steadfastly demand tangible parchment proof for every claim. More plausible than you think, counter those who have meticulously charted the locations of these mills, revealing an uncanny geographical pattern that precisely mirrors ancient pilgrimage routes and established trade arteries. The mason, observing our fingers tracing the enigmatic symbols, offers a concise, unembellished comment. Old, he states, his voice devoid of inflection. Older than me. Older than this building. His tone is entirely matter-of-fact, as if he were merely remarking upon the day's prevailing weather. He then gestures, leading us toward a low, unassuming door situated at the rear of the chamber. The ancient hinges emit a soft, almost plaintive shriek as it slowly yields, revealing a narrow, winding stair that descends precipitously into a cool, impenetrable darkness. As we cautiously make our way down, the air grows increasingly damp, carrying the faint, earthy scent of iron and rich river clay. Our footsteps echo, not with a sharp, resonant clang, but with a dull, muffled thud, as though the very walls themselves are designed to silently absorb every sound. At the base of the winding staircase, we discover a hidden chamber, no larger in its modest dimensions than a simple peasant's cottage. Its rough-hewn stone walls are lined with a series of sturdy shelves, many of which stand empty, silent testaments to what might once have been. However, nestled in one secluded corner, rests a small, dust-shrouded wooden chest. Its lock is conspicuously absent, a sign of its antiquity, or perhaps its deliberate disuse. The lid, surprisingly, lifts with effortless ease, revealing its intriguing contents, a collection of smooth river stones, each meticulously carved with a distinct symbolic mark. The star within the circle is present, as is the familiar uneven cross. Yet there are others we do not immediately recognize. Intricate spirals, precise triangles, and one curious design resembling a fish's elegant tail. We attempt a light-hearted jest, a nervous effort to alleviate the palpable weight of the room's ancient secrets, suggesting perhaps it is an ancient board game, one that must have been dreadfully inconvenient to play, requiring both a hidden basement and absolute secrecy. But the Mason remains impassive, his weathered face devoid of any smile. With a solemn gesture, he carefully selects one particular stone, a carving depicting a ship facing inland, and gently places it into our outstretched hands. "This one," he pronounces softly, his voice barely a whisper, "always comes back. It doesn't matter where it goes. Somehow, it always finds its way here." His eyes flicker momentarily, and for a fleeting instant, we believe we catch the same enigmatic, half-amused, half-guarded expression that we had previously observed in the seasoned fisherman at the coastal town's bustling harbor. Suddenly, a brisk gust of wind rattles the narrow slits high above, and the hypnotic, grinding sound of the colossal water wheel resumes its relentless, cyclical rhythm. Our minds, now racing, conjure vivid recollections of the mysterious slab in the forest clearing, the intricately carved chapel floor, and the ancient codex with its conspicuously missing page. Threads that had previously seemed disparate and unconnected now begin, with startling clarity, to align themselves, although into what precise pattern or ultimate revelation we are not yet able to discern. The Mason offers no objection to our taking the enigmatic stone, nor does he inquire about our identities. He simply returns to his meticulous work with the chisel, the steady rhythm of his labor seamlessly blending into the deep, resonant groan of the perpetually turning wheel. As we emerge from the ancient mill, the river before us glints with a shimmering silver light, and the air carries a faint, unexpected scent of rosemary, surely emanating from some unseen, hidden garden. We commence our journey, following the winding course of the river downstream. The sonorous sound of the water wheel gradually recedes, replaced by the softer, more intimate whisper of water, gently curling around smooth, ancient stones. Ahead, on the opposing bank, a bridge materializes into view, arched, narrow, its venerable stones patched and scarred by the relentless passage of time. From this distance, it appears to be nothing more than a functional crossing. However, as the sun shifts its position, casting new shadows along its weathered side, we discern it, the unmistakable uneven cross, carved just above the waterline, precisely where only those who possess the foreknowledge to seek it would ever notice its presence. We approach the ancient bridge with deliberate, measured steps, the stone beneath our palms feeling cool and smooth where the sun's warmth has not yet penetrated. The river's gentle murmur swells here, echoing with a profound resonance under the arch, a sound that feels almost deliberate, as though the very structure itself hums a low, steady, ancient note. The air is redolent with a complex aroma, a mingling of damp moss, old mortar, and a subtle, faintly metallic scent emanating from the water's slow, persistent abrasion against the iron-rich stones. Standing at the precise mid-span of the bridge, the uneven cross becomes strikingly clear. Its lines, though undeniably crude in their execution, are not haphazard. They are carved with a deep, resolute intent, strokes cut with sufficient depth to endure the relentless erosion of centuries. A kingfisher, a brilliant flash of iridescent blue and vibrant orange, darts past us, its swift flight drawing our gaze to the far bank, where a narrow, winding path disappears into the dense embrace of the trees. Mainstream historical narratives would undoubtedly assert that medieval bridges were nothing short of engineering marvels, quintessential examples of civic utility, serving to bind disparate regions together for the vital purposes of trade and travel. And indeed, this much is undeniably true. However, certain fringe theories whisper that some bridges were far more than mere crossings. They were, it is suggested, crucial marks within a hidden geometry of power, strategically positioned at points where ancient ley lines converged, or where river currents could discreetly carry coded cargo downstream without arousing the slightest suspicion. This particular bridge, if one lends credence to the maps of these fringe cartographers, is situated precisely along a line that purportedly connects a formidable coastal fortress to a ruined abbey further inland, both of which are rumored to have been significant Templar holdings before the order's dramatic suppression. Some historians, predictably, scoff at such precise alignments. Coincidence, they dismissively argue, pointing to the countless medieval bridges that possess no such mysterious echoes or suggestive patterns. Others, however, counter with intriguing old parish records that hint at the existence of charitable patrons whose names were deliberately obscured and whose enigmatic coats of arms bore, strikingly, an uneven cross. On the far bank, the path narrows considerably, and the forest canopy thickens overhead, transforming the daylight into a filtered, ethereal green haze. The air here is heavy with the damp, earthy scent of ancient bark and crushed fern. Beneath our boots, the earth feels soft and yielding, and we occasionally hear the subtle creak of unseen branches high above. The stone in our pocket, the one depicting the ship facing inland, now feels noticeably warmer, though perhaps that is merely the effect of our prolonged grasp. We pass a toppled milestone, its inscription so heavily eroded by time that it could be interpreted as either ancient Roman numerals or, intriguingly, as yet another of those unfamiliar symbols we discovered within the mill's hidden chest. We make a mental note, carefully tucking this observation alongside the enigmatic spiral and fishtail marks. A sudden bend in the winding path brings us into a small clearing, and at its very center stands a solitary column of weathered limestone, no taller than an average man. Its apex is crowned with a simple yet profound carving, a circle perfectly enclosing a star. We have encountered this precise symbol before, on the hallowed chapel floor and on the ancient beam within the mill. But here, it stands in stark solitude, unframed by walls or roof, exposed to the elements. Green moss climbs its ancient sides, and industrious ants move purposefully in and out of its tiny fissures, their movements like a slow, deliberate script. We cannot help but allow a touch of irony to creep into our thoughts. Centuries of powerful kings, influential popes, and zealous inquisitors have come and gone, yet this quiet, unassuming forest post stubbornly endures, its secret exposed to nothing more dangerous than the caress of the wind and the diligent work of ants. The scholarly debate surrounding such standing marks is as profoundly divided as the arguments concerning the bridges. Were they merely humble boundary stones for long-forgotten estates, practical waypoints for clandestine routes, or simply the enduring relics of a vanished folk tradition entirely unrelated to any knightly order. The silent column offers no definitive answers, only its stubborn, enduring presence. From behind the enigmatic column comes a distinct sound, not the familiar rustle of the wind or the cheerful chatter of birds, but something rhythmic and soft, like the gentle brushing of cloth against stone. We circle around and discover an elderly woman seated upon a flat, ancient rock, meticulously weaving a net from coarse hemp fibers. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, flick briefly to us, then to the carved stone we still carry, and without uttering a single word, she returns to her intricate work. After a few moments of quiet industry, she speaks, her voice soft, seemingly addressing not us, but the very forest itself. It only works if you follow the water. We glance toward the river, which reappears here as a narrow, fast-moving stream, its waters rushing with purpose. The woman's gnarled hands never cease their tireless motion, knot after knot, maintaining the same patient, timeless rhythm as the great mill wheel and the mason's precise chisel. We offer our thanks, though we are not entirely certain for what exactly, and step back toward the winding path. As we depart, the faint, elusive scent of rosemary returns, an impossible fragrance here in the deep, ancient wood. Yet it serves as a potent reminder of the hidden garden we never actually saw at the mill. Ahead, the path descends steeply toward the insistent murmur of the stream. Somewhere downstream, the fringe maps have marked the location of the ancient abbey. Somewhere upstream, perhaps, lies the elusive answer to why every path we take and every mark we encounter seems to be inexorably drawing us inward, deeper into this unfolding mystery. They embarked upon a journey following the winding course of a mountain stream, its gentle murmur gradually intensifying into a lively, insistent chatter as they ascended. The water's agitated surface caught the fragmented shafts of sunlight, transforming them into glittering, mercurial shards that proved impossible to fix with a steady gaze, vanishing the moment an observer attempted to focus. Their heavy boots sank marginally into the yielding, damp earth, each deliberate step met by the soft, sucking squelch of soil reluctantly conceding its hold. Higher up, a noticeable transformation occurred in the atmosphere. It became remarkably cleaner, perceptibly thinner, and carried the distinct, invigorating aroma of pine resin, subtly warmed by the filtered light. Distantly, far ahead, the resonant, hollow clap of water striking against unyielding rock reached their ears, an unmistakable promise of an impending, small cascade. Amidst the dense, protective screen of fir and beech trunks, fleeting glimpses of what might be man-made masonry occasionally presented themselves. Pale, precisely squared stones, exhibiting a regularity too perfect to be merely the product of natural forces. Orthodox historians would readily assert that following the dramatic dissolution of the Knights Templar in 1307, their extensive properties were systematically either confiscated by the reigning crown or subsequently transferred into the custodianship of the Hospitallers. Official archives meticulously itemize and delineate each holding, every sacred chapel, and every functional watermill. Yet, a persistent thread of fringe accounts vehemently maintains that not every asset was, in fact, relinquished. Some valuable possessions, these alternative narratives contend, were cunningly concealed in plain sight, ingeniously disguised as secluded hermitages, charitable hospice houses, or even as remote forestry outposts nestled deep within the untamed wilderness, where few bureaucratic officials ever bothered to venture. A contingent of academic scholars often bristles with palpable indignation at the mere suggestion of such speculative notions. If sites of such significance truly existed, they are frequently heard to argue we would undoubtedly possess far more substantial evidence than mere whispered rumors and a handful of ambiguous, anomalous maps. Conversely, other, more open-minded researchers draw attention to peculiar, unexplained lacunae in historical royal surveys, unaccounted for acres of land, structures conspicuously absent from official documentation, and propose that what is conspicuously missing from the historical record might, in fact, be considerably more revealing than what is explicitly present. The anticipated waterfall finally materialized into their view, a captivating spectacle. It presented as a two-tiered torrent, spilling gracefully over a series of weathered limestone shelves before plunging into a tranquil, emerald-hued pool below. Directly behind this aquatic curtain, a dark, cavernous hollow beckoned, a small cave mouth yawning mysteriously. The fine, cold spray from the falls gently misted their faces, providing a refreshing coolness to their skin, and the subtle, earthy scent of wet stone permeated their nostrils. They advanced with deliberate caution, for the rocks in this vicinity were treacherously slick, and a thin, verdant coat of moss yielded beneath their weight with an almost imperceptible sigh. Once inside the shadowy confines of the cave, the tumultuous roar of the waterfall outside transformed into a steady, omnipresent hum, so constant and enveloping that it paradoxically began to approximate a profound silence. The cave walls pressed in closely, their surfaces smooth and wet, yet also distinctly ridged. As their vision gradually adapted to the diminished light, an intriguing detail emerged. Something had been meticulously etched just above the waterline. It was another familiar symbol, a circle circumscribing a star, identical to the emblem previously observed on the forest column, the chapel floor, and the millbeam. However, here it was augmented by an additional element. 3 parallel lines slanting distinctly upward, almost resembling a rudimentary depiction of ascending steps or undulating waves. They found themselves recalling the enigmatic words of the woman, "It only works if you follow the water." A compelling possibility arose. Perhaps her instruction had referred to tracing the stream's path upstream to this very location. Or indeed, perhaps it implied continuing even further to whatever hidden destination this evolving pattern of symbols ultimately pointed. A subtle, yet pervasive irony began to assert itself in their minds. The Templars, renowned as formidable masters of both impregnable fortresses and powerful naval fleets, had seemingly chosen to conceal their clandestine endeavors behind nothing more overtly imposing than a simple waterfall, a natural barrier a mere child could easily wade through. There were no armed sentinels, no massive reinforced gates, merely stone, water, and the enduring, stubborn persistence of a symbol reiterated across disparate landscapes. Somewhere within the echoing, dripping darkness of the cave, a faint, metallic clink seemed to resonate, like the fleeting sound of a chain brushing lightly against rock. It occurred once, then vanished as abruptly as it had appeared, swiftly replaced by the ceaseless gurgle of water seeping between the ancient stones. They knelt to scrutinize the intricate carving more closely, their fingertips tracing the worn grooves. The stone beneath their touch felt surprisingly warmer here, despite the dampness of their hands. A shallow depression was discernible directly beneath the symbol, and within it, partially obscured by fine silt, lay what appeared to be either a fragment of aged pottery or a smoothed shard of glass. It caught the meager light filtering in from the outside pool in a manner that strongly suggested deliberate placement, rather than mere accidental presence. Without conscious thought, they carefully pocketed the shard and then retreated towards the cave's mouth. Emerging back into the open air, the stream continued its relentless upward journey, noticeably narrower now, expertly threading its way through a tight cleft in the hillside. The air in this particular spot carried a faint, almost ephemeral scent of wood smoke, too subtle to emanate from any nearby active encampment. It was more akin to the lingering ghost of long-extinguished fires. As they continued their ascent alongside the diminishing stream, the once dominant sound of the waterfall gradually receding behind them, they found themselves unable to shake the profound conviction that these recurring symbols were less a straightforward trail to be followed and more a complex language awaiting decipherment. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were still merely struggling to articulate its very first letters. The stream further diminished, becoming little more than a shimmering silver ribbon, skipping lightly over smooth, water-worn stones that eerily resembled the ancient, weathered vertebrae of some colossal, long-buried giant. The overhead tree canopy began to thin considerably, and they stepped into an unexpected clearing where the light felt peculiarly concentrated, as though the very air had been meticulously distilled into pure brightness. At the precise center of this luminous space stood a stone trough, low and rectangular, from which a continuous, gentle trickle of water flowed from a narrow spout meticulously carved into a solid block. The sound was soft, yet persistent, much like the patient, rhythmic tapping of someone utterly convinced that their knock will eventually be answered. The trough's interior was coated in a thin, verdant skin of algae, causing the water surface to gleam with a mesmerizing green-gold luster under the direct sunlight. Conventional history texts would undoubtedly identify this structure as a lavadero, a ubiquitous public wash basin commonly found in rural European communities well into the modern era. The practical, functional explanation for its existence seemed undeniably obvious. Yet, its presence here, so remarkably far removed from any discernible surviving settlement, rendered its apparent practicality almost too conveniently placed, raising a subtle flag of suspicion. Fringe researchers, however, quietly murmur about Templar baptisteries, cunningly disguised in the guise of these seemingly innocuous washplaces, serving dual purposes as both sacred ritual fonts and as covert meeting points for those initiated into their secret circle. Some mainstream historians have summarily dismissed such notions as mere romantic nonsense. The Templars had absolutely no need for secret fonts. One such scholar scoffed during a lecture they had once attended. Their baptisms were unequivocally Catholic, public, and entirely orthodox in their practice. And yet, the more circumspect voices within academia concede that a select few medieval water features do indeed bear enigmatic markings whose placement appears to be more profoundly symbolic than purely decorative. They approached the carved spout. Its stone block was streaked with distinct mineral deposits, creating a white, chalky crust. Beneath this superficial layer, they discerned the faint outline of an inscription, severely eroded by time, yet still decipherable if one tilted one's head just so against the light. This time, it was not Latin, but rather a bewildering, tangled amalgamation of characters. Some appeared distinctly Greek, others clearly runic, while a few bore an uncanny resemblance to ancient Phoenician script. The continuous trickle of water caught upon these symbols, making each one glisten momentarily, as if deliberately underlining its presence. They ran a careful finger along the grooves, feeling them faintly bite at the skin, a sharpness that seemed to defy the natural effects of weathering. The air in this specific location carried a dual scent, both remarkably clean and deeply earthy. The unmistakable aroma of wet stone, the verdant fragrance of moss, and a faint, subtle sweetness emanating from the water itself, which strongly suggested its origin lay deep within the subterranean realm. They cupped their hands and cautiously drank. The water was surprisingly, almost shockingly, cold, and it left a distinct, metallic tang on the tongue, reminiscent of water that had rested for ages beside iron. A quiet, wry thought surfaced unbidden. How many profound conspiracies, they wondered, had begun in precisely this manner, a solitary sip from a mysterious spring in a forgotten forest, followed by the insidious conviction that this particular water was intended for their consumption alone. Adjacent to the trough, a low, meticulously crafted wall curved in an almost perfect arc. It now enclosed nothing but a patch of wild grass and an array of wildflowers, yet its distinctive shape remained unmistakable, a precise half-circle, much like the apse of a church, though here it lay entirely open to the vast sky. The stones were fitted together with remarkable precision, entirely without mortar, their edges smoothed as if they had been handled with great frequency, perhaps even polished by countless hands in fervent prayer. A crow's harsh call suddenly pierced the profound quiet from a nearby branch, the sound abrupt and jarring. This drew their attention to a flat, unassuming slab lying at the far edge of the curved wall. It bore the familiar circle and star once again, but this time it was accompanied by the 3 previously observed rising lines and a new, intriguing detail, a crescent moon subtly tucked into its lower arc. They consciously recalled the symbol found within the cave, the one etched into the millbeam, and the missing page from the ancient codex. Each successive discovery had either added or subtracted a minute detail, as though the emblem itself were subtly evolving with each new place it was encountered. Perhaps, they mused, it was indeed a map, but not a map of geographical locations. Rather, it was a map of initiation. From beyond the graceful half-circle, the sound of water perceptibly deepened, indicating a slower, heavier movement than the lively stream they had been diligently following. They stepped past the low wall, traversing the soft grass, and the ground suddenly dropped away into a deeply shaded hollow where a pond lay, its surface as still and unblemished as a mirror. Its placid expanse was lightly strewn with fallen pine needles. Yet, here and there, patches of perfectly clear water reflected the sky with such flawless precision that it created the illusion of the pond holding actual, fragmented pieces of the day itself. At the far edge of this tranquil pond, a distinct structure presented itself. A small, elegantly arched doorway built directly into the gentle slope, its lintel barely clearing the water's surface. Its reflection in the pond's still waters perfectly doubled the arch, creating the illusion of a complete circle, half hidden beneath the earth. The air in this shaded hollow was noticeably cooler, and the scent of damp stone was considerably stronger, tinged once more with that faint, elusive metallic note. A solitary dragonfly hovered gracefully above the water, its delicate wings producing a sound almost too soft to be truly audible, akin to the rustle of paper in a hushed library. Somewhere behind them, the crow called out again, sharper this time, as if deliberately urging them forward. They crouched at the pond's edge, their boots sinking marginally into the soft, damp earth, and intently studied the arched doorway situated across the water. The stones comprising this structure were notably darker, glazed and darkened by countless years of persistent moisture. Moreover, the curve of the arch was almost flawlessly perfect, far too precise to be attributed to mere accident, too refined to be simply rustic craftsmanship. The lintel above the arch was carved with a single distinct mark. This time, it was not the familiar circle and star, but rather a serpent biting its own tail, the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros. This emblem, they knew, was far older than the Templars themselves, predating even Christendom, echoing through the rich tapestries of Egyptian, Greek, and Gnostic traditions. In each of these diverse contexts, it spoke profoundly of cycles, of birth, death, and rebirth, of endless return, and of eternal guardianship. They whispered this profound observation aloud, and the words seemed to linger in the cool, still air for an unnaturally extended duration, almost as if the hollow doorway itself were patiently waiting to absorb it. A ripple then spread gently across the pond's surface, a deliberate, unhurried expansion, yet there was no discernible wind to account for it. They meticulously scanned the water's surface for any sign of movement, but found nothing. The dragonfly had inexplicably vanished. The vaulted opening, partially inundated, presented itself with water gently caressing its base. It was unmistakably evident that beyond this threshold, a subterranean passage penetrated the expanse beneath the hill. This was clearly not a mere conduit for water, nor a utilitarian drainage system, for its generous proportions indicated it was wide enough for an individual to traverse comfortably erect once inside. The contemplation of this fact elicited a frisson of anticipation, tinged with a peculiar delight. They circumnavigated the perimeter of the placid pond, exercising caution to minimize any disruption to the tranquil surface. Upon arriving at the entrance, the foundational slab of the threshold was observed to be obscured by a verdant, irregular film of algae. Yet beneath this organic veil, subtle etchings became discernible, intricate geometric motifs, a sophisticated tapestry of interwoven triangles coalescing into hexagonal and stellar configurations. The craftsmanship was notably shallow, exquisitely delicate, akin to a filigree rendered in enduring stone. From the profound depths of the tunnel, a muted resonance emanated towards them, a rhythmic cadence of falling droplets. This was distinct from the effervescent babble of the stream above, presenting instead the deliberate, pulse-like rhythm of subterranean reservoirs. The atmospheric current flowing from the opening was remarkably cool, carrying the distinct olfactory notes of ferrous minerals and damp soil, subtly imbued with an elusive herbal essence, perhaps the ephemeral fragrance of wild thyme, or the lingering spectral aroma of an ancient, medicinal unguent. The allure to venture within was profound, to surrender to the encroaching shadows, to pursue the auditory beckoning until its path either culminated in a hidden chamber or simply dissolved into an impassable void. Yet, an inexplicable intuition resonated deeply within their consciousness. This was perceived not as a simple ingress, but as a pivotal locus of initiation. To transgress this boundary, devoid of comprehension regarding its intrinsic ritual, bore the potential to irrevocably alter an unseen facet of existence. A hand was placed upon the ancient archway. The venerable stones conveyed an unexpected warmth, defying the ambient coolness of the shaded recess. For an instant, a subtle, deliberate pulsation seemed to emanate, as if the very edifice drew breath. Overhead, an abrupt avian disturbance occurred. The familiar crow, executing a low, deliberate circuit, its sable wings cleaving the atmosphere, alighted precisely on the lintel. Its sharp talons secured purchase against the etched serpentine form, and its obsidian gaze fixed intently upon them. Clutched within its formidable beak was a wispy fragment of pallid material, resembling either aged parchment or dried bark, prior to releasing the minute piece into the waiting water below. The diminutive scrap of material, borne by the gentle currents, meandered towards them, eventually lodging amidst a cluster of aquatic reeds. They extended a hand and retrieved it with meticulous care. Its tactile quality was distinctly fibrous, unequivocally vellum rather than mere paper. Upon its surface, a faint smudge of reddish-brown pigment was discernible, possibly the residue of ancient, attenuated ink, or perhaps a substance of more profound, organic origin. A solitary, unmistakable letter, M, persisted in its legibility. Their gaze ascended towards the sky, but the enigmatic crow had vanished from sight. Concurrently, from the profound depths of the subterranean passage, the rhythmic dripping abruptly ceased. They remained paused at the venerable archway, revolving the fragment of vellum between their fingers, perceiving its subtle textural imperfections. The singular letter M appeared to possess an almost excessive precision, a deliberate intentionality, suggesting it was far from a haphazard remnant of penmanship. A cascade of names began to surface in their consciousness. Magdalene, Mariah, among others. Each name presented itself as a distinct portal into the annals of history, each embodying a unique narrative poised to draw them into its depths. The subterranean passage stretched forth, an ominous chasm, its profound obscurity utterly devoid of even the most ephemeral glimmer of light. A tentative initial step was taken into its maw. The footing proved to be a treacherous, downward-sloping expanse of slick stone. A delicate stream of water traced slender conduits along both lateral surfaces. The auditory landscape within had transformed, no longer the punctuated drip, but a pervasive, resonant hum, reminiscent of air traversing a finely tuned flute, as though the very edifice of the earth inhaled and exhaled with a hushed, deliberate rhythm. Their measured footsteps reverberated, a solitary one, then two, before gracefully dissipating into the compelling, lingering resonance of the tunnel's intrinsic voice. As the descent continued, the olfactory environment underwent a distinct metamorphosis. The sharp, metallic scent of damp stone intensified markedly, now accompanied by an ethereal, subtle sweetness, perhaps suggestive of desiccated lavender, or an ancient, possibly medieval endeavor to cleanse the atmosphere. Historical monastic chronicles allude to subterranean passages situated beneath specific Templar preceptories, within which aromatic herbs were incinerated in censers, not for devotional purposes, but as a strategic measure of concealment. This perfumed smoke was reputedly employed both to render the air breathable and to effectively mask the telltale scent of human presence from potential pursuers. A momentary halt was called at a section where the walls began to gracefully converge. The hewn blocks of stone in this particular segment exhibited a distinct method of fabrication, their faces meticulously polished and interlocked with such precision that the customary lines of mortar were utterly imperceptible. Certain historical scholars would contend that such refined craftsmanship indicates a subsequent post-Templar phase of construction, attributing it perhaps to the 17th century clandestine operators who might have adapted an existing, more ancient substructure. Conversely, other experts, drawing attention to the subtle geometric patterns faintly incised into the very joints, assert a considerably older provenance for the work, potentially reflecting the enduring influence of Roman engineering prowess. They inclined themselves nearer to meticulously trace the contours of one such etching, and illuminated by the focused beam of their modest torch, the previously indistinct triangles and intersecting linear forms seemed to acquire a vibrant, animated quality. This time, their configuration did not coalesce into a star, but rather an imperfect circle. It was impossible to overlook the striking congruence between the absent arc of this design and the curvilinear form of the Ouroboros observed earlier above the pond, with the notable distinction that in this subterranean depiction, the serpent's head was conspicuously missing, as if awaiting its destined rejoining with the remainder of its coiled form at some other undisclosed location. Advancing deeper, the overhead rock formation descended precipitously, necessitating a stooped posture. A slender rivulet continued its course beneath their feet, and its auditory character underwent a transformation, at one moment a distinct, sharp articulation, then a muted, indistinct murmur before resuming its clarity, suggesting its passage over an irregular subsurface terrain. They knelt, extending their fingers into the cool flow of the stream. Submerged beneath the translucent water, a linear arrangement of diminutive, smoothly rounded stones shimmered with a pale luminescence, each singularly inscribed with a distinct, enigmatic, rune-like emblem. A precise tally revealed their number to be 13. This numerical value resonated with historical and symbolic familiarity, invoking associations with the legendary 13 Knights Templar, maritime fleets of 13 vessels, or the 13 hierarchical degrees within certain esoteric Masonic traditions. Conjectures began to accumulate in their minds, piling up like unhewn stones in the oppressive gloom, yet none seemed to offer a truly comprehensive or satisfying explanation. A subtle luminescence manifested in the distance ahead. It possessed a subdued intensity, characteristic of an illumination source such as a solitary candle or a modest oil lamp. Its hesitant flicker danced across the moisture-laden walls, conjuring amorphous patterns that appeared to possess an almost deliberate, animated quality. They advanced cautiously, yet precisely as they traversed a constricted bottleneck within the passage, the spectral light abruptly dissipated, leaving them enveloped solely by impenetrable darkness and the amplified sound of their own respiration. They were on the verge of retracing their path when an unforeseen contact brushed against their hand. It was neither the familiar dampness of water nor the solidity of stone, but a substance softer to the touch, yet possessing a distinct firmness. They raised the object into the revealing beam of the torch, It proved to be a strip of leather, rendered rigid and brittle by the passage of time, its surface intricately embossed with the identical interlaced triangular motifs previously observed on the threshold of the archway. One extremity bore the mark of a clean, deliberate cut, while the opposing end terminated in a series of ragged, worn fibers. Its form suggested it could have once served as a component of a strap or a binding mechanism. From the profounder recesses of the subterranean passage, an auditory phenomenon began to ascend, initially languid, then resolving into a clear articulation, a sequence of 3 distinct impacts, followed by a measured silence, then 3 further impacts. They became instantly rigid. Such a precise rhythm bespoke an intentionality far beyond mere chance. And then a voice, subtle yet undeniably present, reached them. It uttered but a single word: Mariah. The torch's flame wavered capriciously, despite the palpable absence of any air current. They remained utterly motionless. Initially, the resonant name, Mariah, seemed to suspend it in the confined atmosphere, akin to the ethereal tendrils of incense smoke, possessing an ephemeral, almost insubstantial quality, yet utterly commanding attention. Its reverberations propagated through the subterranean passage with an expansive echo that belied the physical confines of their immediate surroundings. A backward glance was cast towards their point of entry. The distant, subtle luminescence from the pond's entrance had vanished, seemingly consumed by the sinuous curve of the tunnel. The notion of retracing their path presented itself as strangely devoid of appeal, as though a retreat would signify the forfeiture of an imminent revelation, one that had patiently awaited discovery for countless centuries. Thus, they resolved to proceed further. The subterranean floor now inclined with a more pronounced gradient. The slender thread of water accompanying them had expanded into a delicate, translucent stream. Its surface, under the torch's illumination, shimmered with a glass-like brilliance, and its hushed murmur was so subtle that it served only to amplify the profound stillness that punctuated each deliberate step. The enclosing walls began to converge, and their tactile quality underwent another transformation. They no longer resembled the crudely hewn blocks of the preceding section, but rather appeared as rock sculpted by the slow, inexorable forces of nature, as if they had transcended the domain of human endeavor and penetrated the ancient, deliberate architecture forged by the very planet. A nuanced olfactory impression now reached them, characterized by the dry, acrid sharpness of burnt resin interspersed with an older, more enigmatic fragrance, challenging precise identification. Could it be myrrh, they wondered? The poignant irony of this discovery was not lost upon their contemplation. Myrrh, traditionally associated with funerary rites, now permeated an environment where spectral voices seemed to traverse millennia. The appellation Mount Moriah ascended into their consciousness, unleashing a complex tapestry of intertwined narratives. Certain historical authorities posit a connection to the venerable Temple Mount in Jerusalem, a locale hallowed as the site of Solomon's Temple, revered universally by adherents of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Conversely, a less widely accepted school of thought suggests, through hushed conjectures, that the enigmatic Knights Templar possessed intimate knowledge of its ancient subterranean passages, and moreover, extricated artifacts from these depths that were never intended to be exposed to the light of day. Even within the esteemed circles of academia, the contention persists. the fundamental question remaining: did Moriah denote a geographical location, an individual, an encoded term, or perhaps a simultaneous convergence of all these interpretations? Navigating a further curve in the passage, the torch's beam illuminated a series of vertical forms arranged in parallel ahead. Upon closer approach, these forms distinctly resolved into a formidable barrier of wooden beams, firmly embedded within the tunnel's structure, akin to an ancient gate. These timbers were secured by robust iron bands, heavily oxidized by corrosion, yet remarkably uncompromised. The timber itself was of such a profound, light-absorbing darkness that it appeared to actively consume the torch's glow, its surface meticulously adorned with an array of carved symbols. Among them, some were immediately recognizable: the interwoven triangular motif and the distinctive incomplete circle. Yet others were more enigmatic. One bore a striking resemblance to a chalice, another to a form almost precisely like a key. The ambient air here was noticeably colder, and the accompanying stream had gained in depth. Its auditory character had once more transformed. Now it seemed to articulate, each ripple a hushed, inchoate syllable. They attempted to manipulate the formidable gate, but it remained immovably fixed. Yet their tactile exploration disclosed a peculiar anomaly. The iron of the band was not uniformly solid. A slender, precisely cut slit traversed one of the bands, its dimensions perfectly accommodating a flat, thin object. The previously discovered strip of leather instantly came to mind. Could this be its intended application? They inserted the leather strip. A soft, muffled click resonated, and the restraining bands perceptibly relaxed their grip. The ancient gate then swung inwards with astonishing facility, unveiling a more expansive chamber beyond its confines. The ceiling within this new space soared to a considerable height, and from an indiscernible source, a pallid, chilling luminescence emanated. It was clearly not the direct glare of a torch, but rather the ethereal, diffused radiance of moonlight, cast as a reflection from a body of water. At the very heart of the expansive chamber reposed a stone basin, notably shallow and flawlessly circular in its design. Its perimeter was adorned with a continuous reiterative motif, the ancient symbol of an Ouroboros, a serpent devouring its own tail, depicted crucially in its entirety, with no discernible arc absent. The basin contained water of such profound stillness that its surface appeared to be wrought from polished glass. As they drew nearer, the unblemished surface subtly stirred, not in response to their proximity, but seemingly from an unseen agency beneath. Ethereal, indistinct forms began to coalesce and undulate, as though the water itself possessed a sentient memory. Initially, the image of a stark, sun-drenched mountain emerged, its apex surmounted by a solitary altar stone. Subsequently, a procession of robed figures, clad in white, became visible, each bearing a small, rope-bound chest, culminating in the vivid depiction of a colossal ancient city wall, featuring a monumental gate whose very archway conspicuously bore the inscribed word, Moriah. The illusory vision, which had momentarily captivated their senses, now receded entirely, leaving only their own image reflected in its wake. Yet even this familiar sight appeared subtly altered, with shadows upon their countenances forming unfamiliar patterns, as if the very experience had etched new contours onto their being. From an unseen point behind them, the distinctive 3 knocks resonated once more. This time, however, they were not met with silence. A different voice, deep and unwavering, emerged from the distant wall of the chamber, uttering sounds in a tongue wholly unrecognized. Despite the alien cadence, a single word pierced through the linguistic barrier, landing with chilling clarity. Welcome. That solitary utterance, welcome, seemed to hang suspended in the frigid air, its syllables coiling insidiously around the periphery of their thoughts. It was evident this was no casual invitation, but a pronouncement of profound significance. They found themselves poised at the very brink of the ancient basin, its surface shimmering under a pale, ethereal luminescence. The narrow stream that had guided their journey to this subterranean space now vanished into a precisely carved channel in the stone floor, replenishing the basin with a measured, continuous flow. Astonishingly, the water's level remained perfectly constant, defying the natural laws of hydraulics, as if governed by principles far more ancient and absolute than gravity itself. The voice did not speak again, yet the ensuing silence was not empty. Rather, it felt densely populated, a palpable testament to a presence other than their own. Kneeling by the basin's edge, they traced the cool, hard stone of its rim with an investigative hand. The serpentine carvings, upon closer inspection, proved to be far more deeply incised and intricate than initially perceived. Each individual scale of the coiled reptile was meticulously etched with miniature symbols, none larger than a human fingernail. Some of these glyphs bore a passing resemblance to letters, though they belonged to no known terrestrial alphabet. Others appeared as tiny, complex diagrams, possibly celestial charts mapping distant constellations, or perhaps arcane alchemical sigils hinting at forgotten transmutations. Their gaze finally settled upon a precise point, where the serpent's head met its tail, revealing a subtle indentation, barely larger than the tip of a thumb. A deliberate press upon this minute trigger initiated a faint, almost imperceptible tremor that vibrated through the chamber floor. With an astonishing grace, the massive basin began to rotate, smoothly and without a sound, disclosing that it was not immovably set into the ground, but rather pivoted on a concealed mechanism. As the colossal stone turned, the water contained within its depths did not slosh or spill. Instead, it flowed mysteriously inward, as if being drawn down into some fathomless, unseen void beneath. Once the basin's slow rotation ceased, a perfectly circular aperture was unveiled at its core. The water, which moments before had filled the vessel, was now entirely gone. In its place lay a disk of obsidian-like black stone, impeccably polished, which caught the chamber's subdued light, reflecting it with a mirror-bright luminescence. They leaned in for a closer inspection. The disk's surface then underwent a startling transformation, not a physical alteration, but a profound shift in perception. In one instant, it offered a clear reflection of their own faces. In the next, it became a window into an entirely different realm. The scene depicted a vast mountain plateau, bathed beneath a sky of such pristine clarity, it seemed to hum with a profound, ringing silence. Dominating this landscape was an enormous tent, resplendent in hues of crimson and gold. Its grand entrance was vigilantly guarded by two figures clad in immaculate white robes, each holding a spear tipped with gleaming silver. Within the opulent confines of the tent, a table stood, and upon it lay a long, narrow object, meticulously wrapped in linen, its unmistakable contours betraying the form of a human body. Before their minds could fully assimilate the implications of this enigmatic tableau, the vision within the disk abruptly shifted. Now they were presented with a torchlit hall, its immense expanse punctuated by colossal stone pillars that soared towards an unseen ceiling. Between these towering columns, numerous chests of blackened ancient wood stood agape, proudly displaying their varied contents: tightly bound scrolls secured with intricate copper clasps, an array of vessels crafted from exquisitely beaten gold, and a diminutive ivory box no larger than a man's hand, hinting at some precious hidden secret. The voice, which had previously emanated from the chamber wall, now returned, its source distinctly different. It seemed to resonate directly from within the black disk itself. It spoke again in that same arcane language, and while its message did not translate literally into their conscious thoughts, an intrinsic understanding permeated their being. "What was hidden in Zion now walks the earth," it declared, a pronouncement laden with ancient prophecy and immediate unsettling relevance. A harsh, grinding sound, stone scraping against stone, abruptly fractured the silence, drawing their attention away from the disk. On the far side of the chamber, a section of the wall, a massive slab, began to shift, slowly sliding inward to reveal a previously concealed passage. This new pathway did not bear the precise marks of human craftsmanship. Instead, its formation appeared entirely natural, its rugged walls intricately veined with crystalline quartz that caught the pale light, scattering it into a myriad of sparkling points, like captured starlight. A warmer current of air drifted from the passage, carrying with it a faint, evocative scent of aged dust and parchment, as if a vast, unseen library had remained hermetically sealed for countless centuries, preserving its ancient secrets. They rose to their feet, momentarily torn between the profound enigma presented by the black disk and the newly revealed beckoning path. However, the choice was swiftly made for them. Without any prior warning, the basin rotated once more, its massive form smoothly gliding back into place, completely obscuring the opening and the disk beneath it. The water, with an impossible fluidity, flowed back into the basin as if it had never been disturbed. The voice then spoke one final time, its pronouncement echoing with an undeniable imperative. The way forward is the way down. With a sense of predetermined purpose, they stepped towards the passage veined with quartz. From somewhere deep within its shadowed depths, the familiar three knocks resonated again, closer now, emanating not from behind them, but from the path ahead. And this time, those measured knocks were unmistakably followed by the distinct sound of approaching footsteps. As they ventured into the passage, the quartz embedded in the stone walls caught and refracted their light, casting thin, shimmering ribbons of color that danced and rippled along the ancient rock. The air here felt noticeably warmer, almost like the gentle exhalation of some colossal entity slumbering deep within the earth's core. The footsteps that had preceded them had now fallen silent, yet their faint echo lingered in their ears, a persistent auditory memory that refused to dissipate. The corridor began to narrow significantly, compelling them to proceed in single file. Their shoulders occasionally brushed against the protruding crystalline veins in the rock, eliciting faint, melodic chiming noises that resonated through the air, as if the very mountain itself was responding with a low, resonant hum to their intrusion. The scent of aged parchment intensified, now mingling with a sharper, more distinct aroma, the the sweet, resinous fragrance of cedar wood, combined with a faint, exotic incense, the kind traditionally burned in sacrosanct temples where the sun's illuminating rays have never been permitted to penetrate. They cast a single glance backward, half anticipating that the basin chamber might have irrevocably sealed itself behind them. Yet, the pale, ambient glow from that space remained visible, a distant beacon. Still, the growing conviction settled upon them that any thought of retreat or return was becoming increasingly improbable with every step deeper into the earth. Conventional historians might vehemently assert that no such subterranean repositories of knowledge could possibly exist, dismissing the notion of the Templars secreting ancient manuscripts within crystalline caves as nothing more than an elaborate piece of medieval romanticism, cleverly disguised as a conspiracy theory. Nevertheless, a scattering of anomalous fringe accounts has stubbornly persisted through the centuries. One particular chronicler, writing in the late 17th century, swore under oath that he had personally witnessed an entire archive meticulously carved directly into a vast quartz seam beneath the formidable Montségur, a place purportedly accessible only to those privy to the secret of the stone that sings. While some contemporary scholars readily dismiss this as a mere allegorical representation of divine revelation, others harbor a strong suspicion that it was, in fact, a poetically rendered description of a genuine hidden sanctuary belonging to a clandestine order. The footsteps returned, faint but undeniably deliberate, prompting them to halt and listen intently. They were not hurried, not frantic. The implication was chilling. Whoever or whatever lay ahead was fully aware of their pursuit and appeared utterly unconcerned by it. This calm, unhurried pace was, paradoxically, far more disquieting than if the footsteps had indicated flight or alarm. Abruptly, the quartz-laden walls gave way to smooth, polished limestone, and the passage expanded into a chamber of such perfect circularity that it appeared to have been meticulously crafted on some colossal, ancient lathe. In the precise center of this chamber stood a pedestal of lustrous black marble, reaching no higher than a man's waist. Upon its flat surface rested a singular, profound object, a book, its covers bound in leather so incredibly ancient that it had taken on the rich, deep hue of dark honey. Encircling the pedestal, shallow channels had been intricately cut into the floor, forming a precise spiral that wound inward directly towards the book. These channels were filled with water, so utterly still and unmoving that its surface resembled a sheet of polished glass. They stepped cautiously onto the narrow stone pathways that separated the water-filled channels. The air within this chamber felt markedly different. It was not merely warm, but seemed to throb with a faint rhythmic pulse, like a slow, resonant heartbeat that reverberated subtly through the soles of their boots. As they drew nearer, they discerned a distinctive symbol embossed upon the book's aged leather cover, a serpent depicted in the timeless Ouroboros motif, devouring its own tail. Within the endless loop formed by the serpent, a cross was intricately placed. Not the familiar Latin cross, but one with arms of equal length, their ends flaring elegantly, reminiscent of a fleur-de-lis. Their fingers hovered tentatively above the ancient cover. The very instant their touch connected with the leather, the water in the surrounding channels stirred. It began to move, spiraling inward with a mesmerizing grace, faithfully following the carved paths towards the central pedestal. This movement was initially silent, but soon it was accompanied by a faint, pervasive whispering. They glanced around the circular chamber, but the ethereal sound had no discernible single source. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Some of the whispered words were distinctly Latin, while others belonged to a language entirely unknown to them. Yet they did not merely hear them, they felt them resonating deep within their consciousness. One particular phrase, in Latin, repeated with insistent clarity, "Sanguis custodit veritatem." The blood guards the truth. With a profound sense of anticipation, they opened the book. The pages within were impossibly thin, almost translucent, as if crafted from solidified air. The script was rendered in a tight, angular hand, inked in a reddish-brown hue that might once have been a deep black, or perhaps had always been a color more intimately, disturbingly human. Interspersed between the lines of text were small, intricate diagrams, what appeared to be maps, constellations of stars, and complex geometric figures. Midway through the volume, they discovered a folded sheet of parchment carefully tucked between the pages. They carefully unfolded it to reveal a detailed drawing of a mountain range, which they recognized immediately as the majestic Pyrenees. A single prominent peak was marked with a stark red circle, and beside it, a small handwritten note in Latin, "Sub lucis," beneath the stone that shines. The sound of footsteps returned, this time directly behind them. Their heart hammering with sudden alarm, they spun around, but the perfectly circular chamber was now utterly empty. The quartz-lit passage through which they had entered was gone, replaced by another arched tunnel leading downward into an even deeper, more profound shadow. The ancient book was no longer resting on the pedestal. It was now inexplicably clutched in their own hands. And for the very first time, a profound question arose in their mind. Had the book been bestowed upon them, or had it been taken? The newly revealed tunnel seemed to swallow them whole, its darkness absolute. The air within this subterranean passage was noticeably cooler than in the crystalline quartz corridor, and it carried a heavy, damp scent of ancient stone, a smell that spoke of millennia untouched by the sun's warmth or light. Their footsteps, rather than echoing, were muffled, almost entirely absorbed by the very floor itself, as though the earth itself wished to erase any trace of their passage. The walls of this tunnel were smoother now, bearing the subtle marks of tools, indicating human construction rather than natural erosion. Approximately every dozen steps, a small recess was carved into the stone, each holding the stub of an ancient candle. Some were burned down to their wicks, their wax petrified into hardened drips resembling frozen rain. Others remained entirely whole, untouched, as if patiently awaiting the return of the hand that was meant to ignite them. They instinctively tightened their grip on the book. Its weight felt curiously different here, heavier, as if the very pages themselves were resisting the unknown that lay ahead. The tunnel then bent sharply to the left, initiating a gradual downward spiral. From somewhere far below, a faint rhythmic echo reached their ears, the sound of water falling into water, a single solitary drop endlessly repeating its descent. It was at that precise moment that they first perceived it. A faint luminescence, barely discernible at first, but growing steadily with each turn of the spiraling passage, until the stone surrounding them began to shimmer with a soft, golden radiance, The walls ahead were no longer merely plain rock, but were intricately embedded with thousands of small crystals, each one catching the unseen light source and bending it outward, diffusing the glow throughout the space. The Latin note from the book, sub lucis, beneath the stone that shines, resonated with newfound, prophetic significance in their minds. Their arduous journey culminates abruptly within the expansive confines of an immense subterranean chamber. Above them, the cavern's ceiling recedes into an impenetrable gloom, its upper reaches lost to the shadows. Yet the bedrock below is strikingly dominated by a singular, colossal monolith of luminous, milky quartz, towering effortlessly to the impressive stature of 3 human beings. From deep within this magnificent stone, a gentle, unwavering luminescence emanates, bathing the entire grotto in an ethereal glow reminiscent of an eternal morning. At its substantial base, an intricately sculpted archway is discernible, its opening precisely dimensioned to permit passage only by bowing low. This ancient portal is not secured by a conventional door, but rather by a smooth, reflective slab of meticulously polished stone, upon which is intricately etched the identical motif of a serpent entwined with a cross, a symbol familiar from the cover of the tome they carry. Before this enigmatic barrier, a solitary silhouette is observed, reverently kneeling. The enigmatic individual is cloaked in a voluminous garment of rough, dark wool, its hood pulled deeply down, obscuring their visage. A single hand reposes upon the ancient seal, fingers extended wide as if attempting to discern a hidden vibration or secret beneath the stone's unyielding surface. The observers, compelled by the scene, venture a tentative step forward. Without so much as an upward glance, the figure breaks the profound silence. Their voice, a low rumble, rasps with the accumulated weight of years, yet possesses an undeniable, unwavering resolve. "You bear it," they intone. A sudden, chilling stillness grips the newcomers. "The book," the cloaked figure elaborates, their words echoing softly in the vast space. It has been patiently awaiting this moment. Regaining their composure, the observers manage to articulate a query. "Who might you be?" The hood shifts almost imperceptibly, offering a fleeting glimpse of a pallid, finely sculpted cheek and the disconcerting gleam of an eye that appears unnervingly keen for one so utterly motionless. "A custodian," they declare, their voice carrying a hint of ancient sorrow. "One of the very last remaining." With a slow, fluid motion, they ascend to a standing posture, exhibiting the measured, almost ritualistic grace of someone whose existence is intrinsically linked to the safeguarding of hallowed artifacts. "You have indeed journeyed beyond the reach of most," they continue, their gaze now seemingly directed at the newcomers. "But to proceed further still will demand far more than mere intellectual curiosity." With a deliberate sweep of their hand, the custodian indicates the imposing seal. "This gateway," they pronounce, their voice resonating with ancient authority, "does not succumb to brute force or earthly might. It yields solely to blood." Their chilling declaration penetrates the very core of the observers, leaving them far colder than the cavern's ambient temperature. "What manner of blood?" they inquire, a nascent, dreadful understanding already forming in their minds. The custodian's lips curve into an ambiguous expression, an unsettling amalgam of a knowing smile and a grave admonition. "It is the very lineage that authored the sacred text," they explain, the same vital essence that struck terror into the hearts of monarchs and was relentlessly pursued by pontiffs. It is the blood that bears the unvarnished truth. With a fluid motion, they step aside, extending an invitation for the observers to draw nearer. Concurrently, the radiant glow emanating from the colossal quartz boulder appears to intensify, casting an incandescent light that curiously eliminates any shadows beneath their feet. A profound, internal certainty settles upon them. To traverse this ancient threshold will irrevocably alter their existence in ways that defy comprehension or quantification. Hesitantly, yet with a burgeoning sense of destiny, they extend their hand and press it firmly against the ancient seal. The polished stone, unexpectedly, conveys a distinct warmth, and beneath their palm, it commences a subtle, rhythmic pulsation. It feels as though the very rock is drawing breath, a slow, deliberate respiration. Once, then twice, followed by a profound, measured exhalation, akin to the silent release of air from the cavernous lungs of a slumbering titan. Beneath their fingertips, a delicate fissure materializes, initially no more than a faint, dark filament. This nascent crack gradually expands, meticulously delineating the serpentine form, winding its way through the intricate design of the cross, until the entire seal transforms into a complex, self-disassembling enigma, meticulously unfastening its components. The accompanying sound is not the harsh, abrasive grating of stone against stone, but rather a profoundly softer, deeply resonant hum, as if the very bedrock were stirring from a long slumber, recalling a primordial melody, a song more ancient than recorded history itself. The custodian, meanwhile, recedes a few paces, their arms now folded discreetly within the voluminous folds of their robe, their visage an inscrutable mask, betraying no discernible emotion. Simultaneously, the inherent luminosity of the colossal quartz boulder surges, its radiant energy intensifying dramatically, consequently bathing the rugged cavern walls in an exquisite pearlescent luster. Within this heightened illumination, the myriad crystals naturally embedded within the raw stone begin to gleam and scintillate with the dazzling brilliance of distant celestial bodies, mirroring entire constellations. For a fleeting yet profound instant, the observers experience an overwhelming sensation, as if they are poised not deep within the earth's embrace, but rather at the very heart of the boundless night sky itself. As the ancient seal finally yields and separates, a distinct current of warm air gently flows forth, dry and faintly perfumed with the exotic essence of myrrh, subtly interwoven with a metallic undertone, reminiscent of a distant, ephemeral tang of blood. Compelled by an irresistible curiosity, they step across the threshold into the newly revealed space. The inner sanctum, contrary to their expectations of another grand expanse, proves to be not vast, but rather a perfectly circular and surprisingly intimate chamber. Its enclosing walls are meticulously lined with panels of highly polished basalt, their surface reflecting the ambient light with the profound, inky blackness of undisturbed water. Dominating the precise center of this sacred space is a raised stone table, an altar-like structure. Upon its surface reposes a slender chest, crafted from resilient cypress wood and meticulously reinforced with bands of intricately worked bronze. The metallic fittings themselves bear the familiar, yet subtly altered engraving of the serpent and cross motif. Here, however, the serpent is majestically crowned, and its sinuous tail culminates in a tightly coiled spiral, strikingly evocative of a radiant sun. Encircling the central table are 12 exquisitely carved chairs, each oriented to face inward, as if awaiting occupants. These venerable seats, though clearly worn by the passage of countless years, show no signs of actual decay. Their robust oak timbers have merely deepened in hue with age, and their surfaces are remarkably smooth, bearing the indelible polish of innumerable hours of occupation. A striking absence of dust further suggests a recent, or at least meticulously maintained, presence. The observers instinctively turn their gaze toward the custodian, who offers a hushed explanation. This, they reveal with a voice imbued with solemn reverence, is the sacred table of the last convocation. It marks the very spot where the guardians pledged their final, unwavering oath, even as their revered order faced its ultimate dissolution. Even in contemporary academic circles, a vigorous debate persists among historians regarding the true fate of the Knights Templar's fabled riches. Did they indeed manage to abscond with a tangible hoard of wealth, or was their legendary secret merely a substantial cache of gold, cunningly concealed from the avaricious gaze of the French monarchy? Were those scholarly minds to be present in this very chamber, witnessing these extraordinary revelations? The observers surmised that such staunch academics might very well be compelled to reevaluate their long-held hypotheses. Yet, it is equally plausible that, clinging fiercely to their established narratives and the intellectual security of their meticulously compiled footnotes, they would stubbornly dismiss the entire scene as an elaborate and exceptionally clever forgery, rather than confront a truth that challenges their foundational precepts. With a deliberate, almost sacred gait, the custodian advances toward the raised stone table. Their hands, guided by an inherent ritualistic precision, carefully manipulate the intricate bronze fastenings adorning the cypress chest. The lid, astonishingly, lifts without the faintest whisper of a creak, revealing within not the expected glitter of precious jewels or the gleam of ancient coinage, but rather a solitary, enigmatic scroll. It is meticulously wound around a slender core of dark, unidentifiable wood, its very edges emitting a subtle, intrinsic luminosity, as if its ancient parchment were not inscribed with ink, but rather imbued with light itself. The script adorning its surface is utterly alien, unlike any form of writing the observers have ever encountered. A perplexing fusion of Greek characters, Hebrew glyphs, and something else entirely. A series of symbols that feel less like a structured language and more like an ancient, resonant whisper. This, the custodian intones, their voice hushed with profound respect, is the testament of the blood, meticulously penned by the final individual, courageous enough to openly embrace and carry the sacred name. Instinctively, they extend a hand, drawn by an irresistible impulse towards the luminous scroll, but the custodian's hand gently yet firmly settles over theirs, halting their movement. It is not destined to be deciphered within these walls, the custodian warns, their voice grave. Should you choose to claim it, the entrance will seal irrevocably behind you, and the path of return will be fundamentally transformed. A soft, almost imperceptible chuckle escapes them, born more of the surreal gravity of the moment than genuine mirth, for the chamber seemed utterly inappropriate for any audible sound. What then, they inquire, is the alternative to this momentous choice? The custodian regards them with an intense, protracted gaze. Chaton. Relinquish it, they offer, their voice devoid of judgment. Retreat from this place and preserve your existence as it has always been, secure, tranquil, entirely unburdened by the profound truths that reside above. A solitary drop of water, a liquid whisper, falls somewhere within the vast chamber, its origin unseen, its source unknown. Their eyes are drawn once more to the scroll, its subtle glow now seeming to synchronize, pulsing faintly in harmony with their own thrumming heartbeat. Their mind races, encompassing the intricate map, the ancient monastery, the concealed quartz passage, the cryptic Latin inscription, and the countless centuries that meticulously forged this very trajectory, long before their footsteps ever graced it. They ponder the enigmatic bloodline, if indeed it is a true lineage, intricately woven through the entire tapestry of this hidden history. With a profound sense of inevitability, their hand closes decisively around the scroll. A slow, deliberate exhalation escapes the custodian's lips. "So be it," they pronounce, their words resonating with an air of ancient resignation and profound acceptance. In that instant, the radiant illumination from the colossal quartz boulder erupts, flaring brilliantly. The polished basalt walls of the chamber appear to quiver, a subtle tremor passing through their dark surfaces, and with a deep, resonant sigh, reminiscent of an ancient tomb settling back into its ageless slumber, the massive seal behind them slides irrevocably shut. Far above, amidst the desolate, silent ruins that mark the earth's surface, the very wind, as if responding to this subterranean decree, abruptly shifts its course, carrying with it an unspoken message of change. With the seal now irrevocably closed, the very essence of the cavern undergoes a profound transformation. It no longer registers as a mere geological formation. The ambient air thickens perceptibly, imbued with an almost palpable electric charge, a static tension that hums with latent power. Each subsequent breath they draw carries a distinct, coppery taste of iron, mingled with the exotic perfume of incense, creating the unsettling sensation of inhaling something simultaneously hallowed and profoundly forbidden. The custodian, rather than making any move towards a potential egress, perhaps acknowledging that such a path no longer exists, instead begins a slow, deliberate circuit around the ring of 12 carved chairs, their fingers trailing reverently across the backrest of each. "These," they murmur, their voice imbued with a newfound gravitas, "are the venerable seats of the witnesses, each one meticulously crafted for a knight who solemnly swore to bear the sacred truth to the farthest reaches of the globe, should the very core of their order ever falter." They carried no earthly treasures of gold, only the enduring weight of memory and the living legacy of blood. Their gaze instinctively drops to the scroll clutched in their hands. Its ancient surface, to their astonishment, appears to undulate with a subtle, almost imperceptible ripple, as if the very parchment possesses a nascent, vibrant life of its own. A distinct warmth emanates from it, permeating their palms, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic beat, a heartbeat, unmistakably, yet one that is not their own. The custodian, observing their attention, makes a deliberate gesture towards the precise center of the stone table. "Place it there," they instruct with quiet authority. "Allow this sacred circle to bear witness once more." With a lingering reluctance, they comply, carefully laying the scroll upon the cold stone surface. The very instant the ancient parchment makes contact with the table, faint, luminous threads of light spontaneously erupt from it, streaking outwards with astonishing velocity, tracing the intricate network of natural fissures in the stone, culminating in the formation of a perfect, radiating sunburst pattern. Simultaneously, the 12 venerable chairs encircling the table begin to emit a low, resonant hum, each vibrating at a subtly distinct pitch. These individual tones gradually coalesce and merge, deepening into a singular, profound bass note that seems to penetrate beyond their ears, vibrating deep within their very bones, an ancient frequency resonating through their core. The custodian's voice now ascends, not in volume, but in an undeniable, resonant authority, filling the chamber with a powerful, commanding presence. The words they utter are spoken in that identical, peculiar hybrid tongue observed on the scroll itself. Though the observers possess no conscious understanding of this ancient language, a profound and undeniable meaning blossoms spontaneously within their minds, an unbidden comprehension of the sacred invocation by the very blood of the revered teacher, by the ethereal seed that traverses the world unseen, by the hands that stoically bore the immense burden when the great city of Rome averted its gaze. We remember, we endure, we shall awaken when the call resounds. The deep, resonant hum intensifies, becoming a tangible vibration that permeates the very air. The polished basalt walls, previously an unyielding obsidian black, now cease to be mere stone. Instead, they shimmer and flicker, becoming vibrant canvases for a series of breathtaking visions. Images cascade across their surfaces, sprawling ancient cities, vast sun-scorched deserts, majestic ships with sails unfurled, cresting the distant horizon beneath the dramatic, fiery glow of a blood-red sunset. They witness a panoramic procession of countless faces, men and women from across the span of centuries. Some are regal, adorned with crowns, others shrouded in mysterious cloaks. Many proudly bear the distinctive red cross of the Knights Templar, while still others are clad in simple, unassuming, homespun garments. Yet, despite their diverse appearances and eras, a singular, profound expression unites them all, an unyielding, indomitable resolve, subtly softened and deepened by an undercurrent of profound sorrow. Amongst the torrent of historical tableau, a solitary image persists, lingering with an undeniable intensity, etching itself into their minds more profoundly than all others. A woman, enveloped in robes of a rich, deep emerald green, stands serenely within the intimate glow of a candlelit chamber. Cradled gently in her arms is a small child. Her countenance, though clearly marked by weariness, radiates an ethereal, almost spiritual luminosity, and her eyes fixed directly upon them, conveying an uncanny sense of recognition, as if she is fully aware of their presence across the chasm of time. The infant's tiny hand, remarkably, grasps a delicate silver medallion, upon which is intricately embossed the symbol of the crowned serpent. As the profound vision slowly dissolves from the basalt walls, the custodian's intense gaze is fixed unblinkingly upon them. "Now you comprehend," they state, their voice a soft pronouncement of revelation. It was never, in truth, about mere earthly gold, nor about venerated relics. It was, from its very inception, about the lineage, the enduring, living line. Impulsively, before conscious thought can intervene, they articulate their immediate understanding. And it still exists, somewhere out there. The custodian's expression remains utterly serene, their composure undisturbed. Not out there, they gently correct, their tone imbued with a quiet certainty. But rather, up there, traversing the bustling streets, lingering in unassuming cafes, imparting knowledge in schools, or quietly composing in countless rooms you pass by daily, without a second glance. The ancient bloodline conceals itself, remarkably, in plain sight. Their gaze instinctively sweeps towards the location where the magnificent quartz boulder should have stood, but they encounter only the impenetrable blackness of an unbroken, unyielding wall. A sudden, stark realization of their predicament prompts an urgent query. How does one exit this place? The custodian, with a deliberate motion, steps aside. You are now the bearer of the testament, they affirm, their voice resonating with the weight of destiny. That precisely is both the key to future revelations and the immense burden you must carry. The path to egress will manifest itself only when the world itself deems it propitious for you to articulate the truths you now possess. Beneath their feet, the unyielding stone floor begins to undulate with an impossible fluidity, shimmering and rippling as if it were a surface of disturbed water. The entire circular chamber, the 12 ancient chairs, and even the enigmatic custodian themselves, all begin to dissolve, melting seamlessly into the encroaching shadows. The deep, resonant hum that had permeated their very being gradually recedes into silence. They blink, and at that instant of disorientation, find themselves standing amidst the desolate ruins above ground, the cool, crisp night wind gently caressing their faces. The celestial dome above is a canvas of pristine clarity, the myriad stars piercingly sharp and coldly brilliant. In their grasp, the scroll remains, its previously vibrant luminescence now subdued, a faint glow, yet still radiating a comforting warmth. From the unseen depths of the surrounding darkness, the haunting call of an owl echoes. Their gaze drifts towards the winding path leading back to the distant village, a route illuminated solely by the ethereal radiance of the moon. The wind, as if on cue, shifts its direction once more, bearing with it the lingering, faint scent of myrrh and incense. In that profound moment, a realization dawns upon them with crystalline clarity. From this moment forward, their perception of history, and indeed of every individual they encounter on the bustling streets, will be irrevocably and fundamentally altered.